Second bell. Well, welcome everybody to Steamboat Springs for the biennial bi-monthly meeting of the Colorado Water. Switch here. Bi-monthly meeting of the Colorado Water Conservation. It's good to have you all here. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll have okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As your attorney to the board, I tried to make sure that the executive session agenda item is one that's appropriate and satisfies the statutory requirements under the Open Meetings Law. And I take note that agenda item 13, the Colorado River Basin Drought Contingency Planning, is in the regular agenda. And that item also contemplates the discussion of demand management. And as such, I'm going to remove agenda items 16, 1 through 6 from the executive session.
Questions about that? We also have one other change to the agenda. Agenda item 21. For tomorrow, Lisa Waters benefit of the commission. Pat decided not to make that. Any other questions? Take a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Director Gallagher, that we approve the agenda with the removal of the executive session for today, the park on the Colorado River, and also agenda item. Then we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 2. I'll proceed to the board minutes from the July 18th and 19th board meeting. Take a moment, a motion to approved by Director Hawkins, seconded by Director Gallagher, that we approve the minutes from the July 18th and 19th, 2018 board meeting. There any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, approve or remove consent agenda items. Do we have any discussion here?
I'm going to move approval of the items on the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Goebel, that we approve the consent agenda items. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have our next board meeting will be in November on the 14th and 15th, and it is in the South Platte Basin. We don't know where yet, or?
It's probably MSU. I'm just waiting for confirmation.
Okay, so probably at Metro State?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Thank you. Boy, we're flying through the agenda today. It's going to be a good day. All right. So now we have the director's reports. First off, Amy's filling in for Bob Randall and with the DNR report. Amy.
Good morning, Amy Moyer, Assistant Director for Water with DNR. I will be giving the DNR report on behalf of Director Randall this morning. He has a budget briefing with the governor this morning, but will be here. A few items to update the board, first related to oil and gas and Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, a sister agency of CWCB. OGCC is implementing the governor's executive order signed by Governor Hickenlooper in July to address safety concerns related to orphan wells and orphan sites across Colorado. In fact, I think this executive order was in the process of being signed during the last board meeting of the CWCB and during the last director's report. It directs COGCC to work towards a reduction in the backlog of high and medium priority orphan wells and orphan sites to zero, engagement of the oil and gas industry in the plugging, remediation, and reclamation of these wells and sites, and a system of financial assurance that prevents future orphan wells and orphan sites by providing sufficient funding for plugging, remediation, and reclamation activities. As part of the EO, the COGCC published a comprehensive list makings. The first is a pooling and hearing process rulemaking that will be completed on October 3rd. And second, a school setback rulemaking that's scheduled for a December hearing. Turning to the upcoming ballot, it's certainly a busy ballot coming up in November. DNR has been reviewing the ballot initiatives and identifying those that may impact DNR operations. Initiative 97 would require a greater setback for new oil and gas development, increasing the setback to 2,500 feet. At the request of COGCC commissioners, the potential impact of Initiative 97 on surface lands available for oil and gas development was prepared. The GIS analysis and results are available online, but indicated that an estimated 85% of non-federal land in Colorado would be unavailable for new oil and gas development. Similarly, the Colorado State Land Board is also going to analyze how this initiative might have affected their past revenues should it have been in place. We are also reviewing Initiative 108 or Amendment 74, which would amend the Colorado Constitution requiring the government to award just compensation to owners of private property when a government law or regulation reduces the fair market value of the property. We'll continue to identify how the passage of these ballot initiatives might impact DNR operations across all of our divisions. And finally, turning to forestry, DNR has been engaged on a number of conversations related to forest health and its nexus with water. It seems that there's been a renewed focus on this connection across many organizations. The Forest Health Advisory Committee, which is a legislatively created body that advises the Colorado State Forester, has prioritized highlighting the connection of forest health and its impact on our water supplies. They continue to have discussions on how this group can play a role in elevating this issue. They've presented at the Interim Water Resources Review Committee, and we've presented to this group on how forest health is an important component of Colorado's water plan. There's also been interest in starting a Colorado Forest Watershed Health Alliance. This concept would use a California model to increase the level of advocacy for watershed protection and forest health. 5 entities, Club 20, Colorado Ag Water Alliance, Colorado Water Congress, Colorado Timber Industry Association, and the Nature Conservancy are working on this in concept. It's certainly an interesting idea, and we're looking forward to seeing how this group takes shape. The intent is that this group would engage in political advocacy and constituency education. So DNR will continue to engage on these efforts and learn more and assess where our area of involvement is most impactful. And that concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
All right, thanks, Amy. We have a question, Director George.
Thank you. I'm interested that you're working on analysis of the ballot questions. We would probably like to know the results of that and won't be convened as a board probably between now and then. Are you planning some email or newsletter that would give us a chance to follow up on this?
The OGCC analysis is posted online on their website already. It's completed. I believe the Colorado State Land Board is in the process of taking a look and seeing what analysis they can provide. And then the rest is really just a general look in terms of looking at how these amendments initiatives might impact operations, and so not a specific analysis. So anything documented will be posted and available online.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Amy? Thanks, Amy. All right, we'll continue on with the IBCC Director, Dr. Stolp.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Board. The IBCC will be meeting on October the 18th over at Durango at Fort Lewis College. And so some of those folks won't have to travel quite so far for the IBCC meeting, and others will. But no, trying to move IBCC around from time to time. I think the biggest thing to report is probably the progress of the financing work group within the IBCC. They have had a working draft document that they've been working on. We have shared that working document with the IBCC, the full IBCC, and the roundtable folks, because what we run into is some of the members that had roundtables were getting the benefit of their roundtable on that working draft, and not everybody had a person from every roundtable on the finance committee. So and if anybody wants to be on that finance committee, you just have to show up. The finance committee actually is going to have either a call in or some of us will meet at 1313 on October 1st. And Viola will be getting that out soon. I think, as I've reported before, but there's been kind of three paths, parallel paths going on here with the Interbasin Combat Committee's committee working on this. The Walton Family Foundation and Gates Family Foundation are sponsoring an effort that some of us participate in with the Keystone Group. They continue to work, and they have subcommittees or working committees within their effort too. And then the Colorado Cattlemen have initiated a group through their Ag Water Network, primarily of ag irrigators and participants, and some of us are also participating on that. So I think the goal is to converge these three efforts at the appropriate time, and I think we'll know a lot more about that based on what's been done by the time we get to the 18th of October, because I think the Keystone Group had some earlier dates, but they've been extending those dates out. And I think there's been a real healthy interaction between the three groups on what they're looking at in the financing. We've had some interesting information on what the nature of it would be, whether it be a ballot initiative, could it be a legislative type of institution, could it, and so who would write the language if it was a ballot initiative, and then what the funding source might be. And I think we've touched on that before with some presentations here. So a lot of that's still up in the air. So there's a lot of people working on this, and I hope by the end of the year we'll have converged together with a kind of a uniform plan. And I think we'll probably talk later about the Water Availability Task Force. They've been meeting, as well as the Ag Impact Drought impact task force been meeting too.
All right. Thanks, John. Any questions for John? All right. Well, I just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge we have one of the Routt County Commissioners here with us, Ken Brenner, and just want to thank you for hosting us. Thank you for participating in our meeting this morning. If you want to say anything to us, you're welcome to. Just glad that you're here.
Thank you.
If you want to state your name and.
My name is Ken Brenner. I actually am not a county commissioner. That would be Doug Munger. But thank you. I did serve as a council member for 8 years. I just wanted to say thank you for coming to Steamboat Springs. We're very proud to have you here at this rather unique water year that we're experiencing. You can bring all the clouds and cold weather and rain that you want. We'd really appreciate that. I wanted to say that I do serve as the chair of the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District Board, and that's probably what you were remembering. So wanted to say welcome, but sorry that we can't attend all of your proceedings. There's too much going on. One of the things that we take a lot of pride in is a group called the Legacy Committee, which is all of the governmental agencies and advocacy groups in Northwest Colorado meet about once a month. And that's this morning in Hayden. So I will be leaving here shortly to make that meeting and then come back for the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy Board's monthly meeting. And that coincides exactly with, that starts at 1 o'clock. So we're going to miss your comment period this afternoon. Otherwise we would be here and anxious to hear the discussion. So again, thank you for coming and look forward to how we move forward in this very challenging time.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And once again, thanks for coming. And sorry about the mistake on the Routt County Commissioner. Maybe it's something you'll do in the future. All right. We'll continue on with agenda item 5C, and we have Jen Yezik here.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Jen Yezik, the Deputy Commissioner at the Colorado Department of Agriculture, and I send greetings from Commissioner Don Brown. Late yesterday, he had his budget meeting with the governor's office as well, so things are busy there in the Capitol. Wanted to make sure I say thank you to Director Randall on signing the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program with the Republican River on August the 28th. Undersecretary Bill Northey from the U.S. Department of Agriculture was in the Ray area to sign the updated CREP agreement. So thank you very much for the progress that was being made there. Also, the Nebraska-Kansas settlement of $8 million is very important as well. And so wanted to highlight those two items from the commissioner. Also, the Colorado State Fair ended on Labor Day, and wanted to just let folks know that almost 450,000 people attended the state fair this year. Also, the 4-H and FFA youth that showed their livestock brought in $495,000 with selling their livestock at the auction. So again, it was a successful state fair there in Pueblo. Of note, Commissioner Brown and I attended the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture's annual conference in Hartford, Connecticut. The reason it was in Connecticut, the Ag Secretary of Connecticut is the president of that national association. So there was a lot of discussion about the Farm Bill, food safety, international trade, and labeling of food products. And of course, the Farm Bill is very much of concern. It expires at the end of this month. Will Congress pass that Farm Bill and include the conservation measures that we need in Colorado and the other items? And of course, trade agreements continue to weigh heavy on a lot of the producers around the country, including here in Colorado. Then you also include the drought and the weather, and it's a major concerns that we are looking into and trying to hope that the Farm Bill does pass and bring some security and a safety net to the producers here in Colorado. Of note, on the August 21st winter livestock auction report, it stated that due to dry conditions and short grass in some areas of the state, the sale that day comprised mostly of calves being pulled off the cattle early. So there's a lot of hard decisions being made across the state due to the weather. Also, I know many of you may be familiar with our insectary that's in Palisade that produces insects to fight against weeds and noxious weeds. And so there was a workshop on Canadian thistle rust fungus in Durango, and there were 12 cooperators who signed up for the release and monitoring of rust fungus. One of the things I learned this past weekend, attending one of the day of the Pedal the Plains, I was not riding the bike, but the Colorado Department of Agriculture had a booth at the Lyman stop, and also there was a stop near Byers, and we had a demonstration of the goat head. Are all of y'all familiar when I say goat head? And we also fight that with an insect. There's the puncture vine weevil that helps to destroy the plant that produces the goat heads and has flat tires. So nearly every biker that saw that said, "Oh, good, that's really good. I'm going to purchase those weevils to help reduce goat heads and flat tires." So, and the Pedal the Plains was first time I had been a part of it, and it was a very eye-opening experience to see that the urban and rural coming together and understanding what's on the eastern plains of Colorado. So I think that's about what I wanted to share with folks today, and be glad to have further discussions with y'all later today.
All right, thanks, Jen. Director Stolp.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take a moment and tell you, it was reminded by Jen's comment about the three-state get-together that Commissioner Brown helped set up. It was actually where the two corners of Nebraska and Kansas come together in the Colorado state line. And Bob Randall would not tell this on himself, but he was one of the speakers. And so when he got up to make his remarks, he his first remarks, he said, "It's not often that I leave Colorado, walk across Nebraska and Kansas to get to the podium." and he literally did. So anyway, it was really a great event that community put on out there. And Secretary Northey, Undersecretary Northey from the USDA was a participant in it. And so interesting setting. I grew up in Yuma County, but I had never been to that point before in the county. So it was a first for many of us.
Any other questions for Jen? I'm pretty excited to hear about the goat head weevil. That's something that my wife and I fight all the time.
From us, so just call the insectary.
Okay, and the Canadian thistle as well. That's both good. All right. Well, we'll continue on with our CWCB director, Director Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the audience for being here today too. Some of what's going on in the agency, there's a lot happening. We're moving quickly as usual. In the water supply group, you may have already heard, but we're working on an implementation working group, and we're really spending some time and effort getting this message out to the basin roundtables. But we're planning to have a 6-month basin-led group. The time frame would be January to July for SWASI and basin implementation plan input. And the purpose of this group is to really discuss how to use the SWASI data and then what elements of that could be used in the basin implementation plan updates. We're currently doing outreach and gathering input from all the basin roundtables, the interbasin compact committees, and then also anyone we can get to do our short surveys. And then also in regards to that, we've asked for a water plan funding non-reimbursable application. And this is really focused on providing a holistic approach to updating all of the aspects that are related to the water plan or our whole entire planning cycle. So the SWASI basin implementation plans, Colorado's water plan, and we're hoping to capitalize on this holistic approach and the progress that's in process and build momentum on that to meet the water plan goals and initiate the water plan update by 2020. And that's the 5-year anniversary of the plan. some other things that are happening in the water supply planning section as it relates to the water plan and our conservation goal. There is the water loss, the Colorado Water Loss Initiative. Kavanaugh and Associates and Water Systems Optimization won the contract to have these to do these trainings. Both of those firms are top water loss experts in the nation, and they've teamed up to produce those trainings. We have over 52 entities registered to date. Those are total people registered. Of these, 39 are covered entities. So that's 46% of all the covered entities in the state are registered for these conferences. We consider that a success already, just that they're aware of this. Some of what's happening, we all know we're in drought. If you don't know, you're not paying attention. And we've had a rough summer with fire, and we're also worried about flood. You'll get to hear about, coincidentally, it's the 5-year anniversary of the September 2013 flood. And so we're thinking about that at this point, but that was John Stolp's phone. So it's been, on that note, though, it's really important to recognize it's been a rough year when drought and fire come and with the potential of flood. I have to give a shout out to our in-stream or inner in-stream flow folks, because in a rough year like this, they're being diligent and hearing stakeholders, and it's a rough time to be doing this summer. And so they are doing the right things, and they have strong backbones. And while they're doing all that, Kaylee and Dawn are also settling cases wherever we can. So those have been some busy people this summer. And so if you can thank them, I would appreciate that. In terms of some other interstate and federal issues with WOTUS and the funding for endangered fish recovery programs and the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program, Colorado and our other fellow Colorado River Basin states are breathing a very tentative sigh of relief. As Congress has taken some steps to provide funding next year to continue the good work being done in the Upper Colorado River Basin and the San Juan River Basin endangered fish recovery programs, as well as to support the monitoring and research done as part of the Glen Canyon Adaptive Management Program. The funding for these programs was drawn into a bit of uncertainty earlier this year when the Office of Management and Budget issued a directive that the hydropower revenues from the Colorado River Storage Project or the CRISP facilities would be transferred to the U.S. Treasury rather than the Bureau of Reclamation that fund these critical programs. So Colorado, in good fashion, along with our fellow Colorado River Basin states, water users and stakeholders have actively been voicing our concerns, which we do so well, and the support for those programs. So in addition to the good work being done to recover those fish, the two endangered fish recovery programs allow water development to continue in accordance to applicable state and federal law. So that these programs are incredibly important as we move forward. So I said tentative because this is a legislative fix only for this year. So we'll be keeping an eye on it and keep you updated. Our work on the Colorado River is also moving along. Yesterday was a 7 Basin States Principals meeting. There was attendance by the commissioner, along with alternate commissioners, John Stolp and John McLeod, and Brent Newman was also there, looking and continuing work on the Upper Basin DCP. In terms of the agency and the nuts and bolts of it, we're doing a website survey we are really trying to be a more user-friendly agency and following the lead of some of the other state agencies. So in hopes to make our new website easier to use, we've put out a survey on our main page to solicit feedback. We love feedback. It's a really short survey, but if anybody wants to get on there and fill it out, it's hugely helpful to us as we move forward in that development. Also, in terms of the nuts and bolts, you might notice a new face at the table. Viola Bralish is a new board coordinator. Andrew's still sitting there, but he's moved on to bigger and better things in the agency. And so we're glad to keep him, but I'm really happy to have Viola, and she's going to continue her work with the IBCC and also as the board coordinator. So she's got a lot of stuff on her plate. I'm happy to have her. We're comfortable already together, so we'll get along just fine. So you'll start being in communication with Viola post this meeting. I think you all heard from Joe about his medical situation, and Joe Busto retired at the end of August to really focus on his health. The intention is to bring him back part-time at some point in the future. And we can't say enough about Joe and what he's done with the weather mod. And just so you all know, as an aside, staff is supporting him in every way that we can, and people are bringing food and stopping by and doing those things. So he's doing pretty well, considering. Also, Steve Biondo is retiring after a couple decades of service to the state. He's in the funding and finance section and does a lot of the contract work. He's not here today, but I wanted to make sure that I thanked him also. His last day is Friday of next week. And on that note, we've made a couple new hires. Lauren Miramont, can you stand up, Lauren? She's actually taking Steve's place. She's got extensive finance experience, and she comes to us from CU Boulder. So we're really happy about that. We also have two other new people. Vivian Pinelli, she's actually at our front desk. She's not here today, so I can't make her stand up. But she's not even in the office because she's in Taiwan visiting her family. That was pre-planned before she got the job. But she is a CU graduate, 2018 CU graduate in environmental science and geography degree. And so we will probably be using her for other things beyond the front desk. And then Kara Scheel is new to the stream and lake protection section. There was some shifting in there after Jeff retired. So she'll be working on water availability analysis and other technical issues related to in-stream flow appropriations. And we are so happy to have her. And then on a final, really positive note, you might have also heard that Russ George is being recognized. One of our own, Director George, is being recognized as one of the 2018 Colorado Governor's Citizen Awards. So he will be getting a medal, and this is one of the highest honors you can get as a citizen. This is happening October 11th, and really we wanted to personally thank him for all of his public, or many years of public service. Yeah. You might see Russ as just a CWCB board member, but he has a bit of a distinguished career. So he's not only our board member, but he's been a cabinet member of not one but two governors, Speaker of the Colorado House of Representatives, college president, which I think might be one of his most proudest achievements. We really appreciate the progressive and innovation that Russ has been not only to us, but all of the state of Colorado. He also, I got to keep going because there's I got a list. He was the director of the Division of Wildlife before it was Parks and Wildlife, DNR director, CDOT, and then with us. So we want to thank you personally. we hope our thank you means as much as a citizenship award from the governor, but we'll be clapping loudly as you are one of our own out there. So that's October 11th. Thank you so much, and that's all I have.
All right. Any questions for Becky? Okay. I just want to welcome from the board, welcome Lauren, and if you're listening on the internet, probably not, from Taiwan, Vivian.
Yes.
And Kara as well. So, and I just want to echo that. Congratulations to Russ. You know, as a newer board member here, I always heard Russ's name because of the roundtable and the influence you've had and all the things that you've done. So I consider it an honor to be able to serve with you on this board. And what I found out is he's just a normal guy, and so that's what I like most. So it's fun to serve with you in this manner. So thanks, Russ. All right, well, we'll continue on. Kevin Ryan with the State Engineers Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Director Gallagher, for having us here this week. I'll update you all with a few things that are going on in the State Engineer's Office and some of our division offices, and a couple other items. And then we have a guest here today from the Division of Water Resources that will also give you a quick update on a few things. A few things that are going on in our office. We've talked about the Republican River Basin and some of the things that we talked about them yesterday, and rulemaking and boundaries and settlements and so on. And I did want to let you know that we are now moving ahead with the rulemaking in the Republican River Basin. I've got an update on the boundary legislation in just a minute. Also, the following leasing pilot projects that we've talked about so much in recent years, and Director Goebel is familiar with how well that's working in his basin down there. We did initiate an effort in January based on just a nod of approval or affirmation from this board to work on factors for HCU calculations across the state. I think you'll get an update on that tomorrow when we talk about a grant to do that work. But that's something that we're working hard on, and I think you'll see that through the following leasing pilot project, this effort that I just mentioned, and maybe some upcoming legislation, there is a continuous effort to refine our understanding in the state of how we calculate the historical consumptive use of a crop and use that toward, among other things, successful implementation of ATMs. It's good work that's coming out of our office and the CWCB and some of the water users in the state. In a similar way, rainwater harvesting pilot projects, that work continues. The one pilot project that's active is Sterling Ranch, southwest of the metro area. And our office is doing some work with a consultant on developing regionally applicable factors for rainwater harvesting and the consumptive use or the amount of rainfall that falls and is consumptively used by native vegetation. And actually, the board approved a grant for that work to continue a couple meetings ago. I would like to mention that for the Division of Water Resources, particularly in a couple of our division offices and on our designated groundwater basins, hemp and marijuana use continue to be a challenging issue for us. And I need to be clear that it's not the fact that hemp or marijuana are being grown, because those are crops or plants that can legally be grown in Colorado, and we've affirmed and reaffirmed in formal and informal ways that we allow irrigation water rights to be used for those crops or those plants. However, it is a challenge for us when well-meaning individuals or corporations come into the state wanting to be a part of this economy, and they're not familiar with water laws. So very often they're using water rights or groundwater, surface water or groundwater that should not be used for those types of things. Conflicts with the water right. And it's a significant workload for our staff. I may have updated you on that in the past, but I wanted to mention next to me, our director from Ag, we met with Dwayne Sinning and Maureen West just last Monday from your office. Two extremely helpful people, two people involved in hemp with the Department of Agriculture, to work on ways that our agencies can continue to work together, remove some roadblocks for well-meaning legal water users or water users that want to be legal. And I just want to give you a nod and say thanks for those two. We identified about 5 or 6 positive things that we can do going forward, and it'll be very helpful for us, and I think helpful for your office. So thank you for that. I was not here on the next item. I was not here at the July meeting. I suspect Mike Sullivan, who stood in for me, may have updated you that we have 2 new division engineers. And this actually goes back to July 1st. But in case you didn't get the update, I'll make sure you know that with the unfortunate retirements of Dave Nettles and Steve Whitty in Divisions 1 and 2, we just kept things going seamlessly with Corey DeAngelis as the new division engineer in Division 1. And since that time, his lead assistant division engineer has been named. That's Mike Hine, for those of you that know Mike. And similarly in Division 2, you probably know that Bill Tyner was named the new division engineer on July 1st. And since then, his new lead assistant division engineer, Rachel Zancanella. And I think that's good information for you, because many of you are working directly with those folks on many issues, day-to-day administration issues. So we're just very happy to have those 4 people in place and continue putting people in leadership positions that can take us well into the future on a couple difficult basins. We mentioned a couple things about the Republican River Basin already, and among other things, the settlement. I just wanted to mention to Laura Chartrand, it's never lost on me that as we do these special things and they work out well, it's not without a lot of expert guidance from your office. And in the Republican, we have Dan Stoyer and Scott Steinbrecker, and especially on these settlements, it's beyond indispensable when I describe Scott Steinbrecker's involvement in that. So thank you very much for that. 2 items I just want to talk about potential upcoming legislation, just because they are relevant to part of our discussions we've had before. On fallowing leasing pilot projects, we do see an effort again to make deficit irrigation a part of the fallowing leasing pilot projects. Deficit irrigation, I think you can look at that as a form of fallowing when a crop is shorted its consumptive use. So we don't really know what will happen with that legislation, but I do know that, again, the state engineer's office will be a part of developing criteria and guidelines for doing deficit irrigation. Also, legislation, the Republican River Water Conservancy District boundary, that's been an issue that water users out in that area would like to see that boundary modified. I've updated you on this before. We do see a bill before the Interim Water Resources Review Committee that would provide for that boundary amendment, and we'll just see what happens on that. 2 items on drought. I just want to say that I get asked about drought and how we're affected by that in our office from time to time, and sometimes it's from the media, sometimes it's just in casual conversation. And I think it's interesting to note that in many ways, I say that we've got a system that helps us manage drought in this difficult time, and it's the prior appropriation system. And I don't mean to say that in a cold, heartless way, but we're very fortunate in Colorado when things get difficult that at least we have an objective foundation from which to base our administration decisions. And in that regard, very often my answer is, well, the call is more senior than it normally is. And we're very fortunate that we have good storage to bring us through this season. Hopefully we can say that next year, by the way. But I do need to say that that's not true across the state. Director Hawkins and I talked yesterday about the San Juan River and a call that was very unusual there this year, and how people need to work through that. But certainly it goes without saying that on the Yampa, where water has been somewhat plentiful in the past, where we haven't had calls, we had a very unique, brand new situation this year, and you'll possibly hear more about that in just a minute. But we did have a call for the first time on the main stem of the Yampa this year. And to that end, I just want to mention that I want to move ahead. I wanted to leave time for our guest, Aaron Light, the division engineer here in Steamboat for Division 6, is here today. And as you've seen me do in the last few meetings, I'd like to bring our division engineer in to just for you to meet and hear their thoughts on things. The interesting thing about Aaron and this river basin is that I think we can look at many of our basins and our division engineers, and they are overseeing certain things that have always happened in that basin, that have happened for as long as we can remember. Things like measuring diversions, keeping good diversion records, overseeing waste, all those difficult issues that have become secondhand for many water users throughout the state. That's probably a difficult thing for division engineers in other parts of the state. I think it gets beyond difficult when you have the responsibility of ushering in many of those new concepts to water users that are not necessarily familiar or practicing those, and they're good water users, but they need that good administrative guidance and education. So I think Erin, while she's extremely competent technically on the engineering work we do and the legal work we do, I think she's had an extra challenge in working with the water users, the good water users in Division 6, to help them come into a new era. And this recent call on the Yampa River is a case in point where Aaron had to expertly guide the water users to a brand new situation. And my discussions with them is that they're very happy with the way that was done. So I did want to mention that before we bring Aaron up. Aaron is just recognized as a leader in the basin, as somebody that works on solutions. And I'm just happy to have her. Aaron, if you'd like to come up to the podium and finish out my director's report today, I'd appreciate it.
Welcome, Aaron. If you want to state your name and who you're with.
Yes, Aaron Light, Division Engineer, Division 6, Division of Water Resources. Before I jump into the Yampa, I don't want to forget about the White. I mean, obviously I cover 3 major basins, and there's Platte, Yampa, and White. But I think the White shouldn't be left out in a year like this. I think a lot of people did not expect a drought like we've had in the northwest part of the state of Colorado, because people enjoyed the skiing up here this past winter, because we actually did have some snow, but we were still well below average. And like most everybody else in the state, summer brought well above average temperatures, wind, and no rain. And so we were sent into a drought, maybe not as bad as down Durango, but still a very bad drought. So on that note, on the White River, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the CWCB worked together to release water from Lake Avery for the second year in their 3 and 10 loan or lease agreement. So in 2018, 20 CFS was being released from Lake Avery to help with flows in the White River. Despite that 20 CFS, we still experienced very record flows in one particular gauge that I want to mention. It's the White River near Meeker gauge. I picked this gauge to talk about a little bit because it's a gauge that has 108 years worth of record. And during the dates of August 7th through August 16th, this is when Lake Avery water was in the river. Flows had dropped between 70 and 90 CFS during that time frame. And during that time frame, even with the reservoir water in there, we were 40 to 60 CFS below the lowest on record in 108 years of record. So I think it's worth noting that it was extremely dry in the White River, with larger record flows probably than any of the other basins here in Northwest Colorado. That did not prompt a call. Fortunately, it was very close, because there was one gauge. It's the White River at Coal Creek, where there was a short period of time where the only water in the river was the reservoir water. And I had directed the water commissioner to more or less, if somebody turned back on causing a reduction in flows at that gauge, to begin curtailment. Fortunately, that did not happen. Then, as far as the Yampa, as Kevin indicated, we did end up having to issue a call on the Yampa River. That started on September 4th. However, prior to that, about 2 weeks prior to that, I had made a decision to put the Yampa on call, and within 12 or 18 hours, I had realized that I was probably a little too hasty and anxious at placing that call, so I delayed it. I think the delay in calling it was a delay was the appropriate action, because I had a fairly good sense that we were still going to have a call. It was just a matter of when. And for some people, for example, municipalities around this area, it was a good alarm to say, time to pull out our OG plans, refresh what we need to do, look at what we need to do. And I shouldn't even say refresh, for the first time, look at what we need to implement these OG plans. So, and it also put all the water users on alert as to what was going to happen if we did end up having a call. So again, on September 4th, I set the call on the Yampa River. And since then, I think we've had some success. We definitely got the flows to what they needed to be down at the bottom end of the system. For those who don't know, the call was set at the very bottom end of the system, the last pumps before you enter Dinosaur National Monument. So we were administering the entire Yampa River. Part of the thing that caused the, I don't want to say cause, but the reason we had to set a call was our efforts to protect reservoir water for the recovery program. Water had been released from Elkhead Creek Reservoir for several weeks at this point, and we were unable to protect all the reservoir water down to the bottom of the system, which again, it was really what prompted us having to set a call. As far as, I think the biggest challenge for myself in trying to administer this call is timing. Just on Monday, by way of example, I went ahead and brought Craig Station back into priority. It's their synthetic products ditch water right. I brought it partially back in priority, which meant that they could stop their releases from Elkhead Creek Reservoir. That stopping of the reservoir water is going to take 5 to 5.5 days to get all the way down to Deer Lodge. So I won't see an effect of that decision for 5 to 5.5 days. And likewise, that was the case when I pulled them out of priority and told them they had to release the water. Their other source of water right now to make up their other portion of their water rights, so they have 2 units down there. They have one unit that was being fed by Elkhead Creek Reservoir or served by Elkhead Creek Reservoir. The other one is being served by Stagecoach Reservoir. If I bring more of that water right back into priority, that means I stop releases from Stagecoach. 7 to 7.5 days, maybe eight days before I see an effect down at Deer Lodge. So this has been the most difficult part, I think, of the administration. And this is the same as you go up tributaries, and my water commissioners are running out there shutting off water up tributaries. The timing to get that water down, if it even gets down, is quite lengthy. And I say if it gets down is definitely there are people in priority with measuring devices that can take that water before it even gets to the Yampa. So we're not seeing a tremendous amount of water getting to the Yampa on the tributaries. So there's a benefit to some of these tributary water users from this curtailment. Lastly, I just thought I would say, really, I have heard more positive comments from this experience on the Yampa. And I see it as a positive, as mostly for myself, as having to pull out these OG plans and start administering them. It's been wonderful working with the city, Catamount. I can name, a handful of people that have worked very well with me in trying to implement these augmentation plans, and then working with Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District to have these releases made has been seamless. It's been absolutely perfect as to how you'd want that to work. So that's how I see as a positive. Again, I've heard a lot of positive comments, and maybe I shouldn't end on the negative, but definitely for those individuals that were shut off because they didn't have a measuring device, there's been a lot of outcry and people upset that they were being shut off because they didn't have a measuring device. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron or Kevin?
Yeah, Jake.
Director Gallagher.
I just wanted to say thank you to Director Ryan and our division engineer. I think Aaron had a very complex situation and a learning curve to bring everyone in this basin along with her, not just the Yampa, but along in the White. I especially appreciate your keeping in communication with not just water users, water rights holders, but also our staff and myself through this process. It's been very complex, and I applaud your efforts in trying to handle this with all these balls in the air along a very long reach of the river, really almost the entire reach of the river, which is probably up from Cross Mountain, 246 miles or so, something like that,
Yeah.
river miles. So it's sort of like doing something out in Martian orbit and waiting for the message to get back here in terms of time delays and seeing whether it has the desired effect. So it's a very difficult situation that you managed, and I appreciate the efforts you put into it, you and your staff.
Thank you, Jay.
All right. Any other questions? Director Dutton.
My comment isn't for Ms. Light, it's for Director Ryan. I appreciate what you noted about the issues with staff administering hemp and marijuana. And some of my friends over at the Division III office have noted the complexities and the issues that they faced in trying to administer water rights and just effectively shepherd water around for all the hemp and marijuana users, when, like you note, a lot of people come in pretty excited but maybe don't have the appropriate water right, and they have expressed how the improvement of Department of Ag and DWR working together to improve the understanding of the rules is really going to help them. So thank you guys for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. We'll move on with the Division of Parks and Wildlife Director, Bob Brochette.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. I know we're a little off, so I'll try to get us back on track. Becky gave me that eye look, so I will be quick. I know it well. With the passage of the legislation, our Future Generations Bill legislation allows us to do license fee increases and other things. The Commission's been embarking on we're calling this forums. It's a way, much like the Water Conservation Board has their meetings, but we set aside 2 to 3 hours at a time and invite folks in that we don't typically hear from, and to kind of get their thoughts on where we're going. And certainly the 3 forums that we've had so far dealt with hunting seasons and preference points. So that was a fun one. The second one was in no particular order, but the legislature in passing the bill in their declaration talked about where the next state park is going to be. And certainly it's not just let's cobble together some money and let's go out and buy another big piece of property and call it a state park, but how do we do it and with who? So they're really informative and inclusive discussions. The third gets to relevancy of the agency when we're talking about engaging broader communities, and who do we do a good job with and who not, and certainly with changing demographics and immigration into the state and changing priorities, all of those things culminating together. I think the commission and the agency, was really good to hear from folks about what we're doing good and what we're not, or certainly what we could be doing better. So to that end, the commission meeting in September, a couple of weeks ago, we had in Glenwood Springs, Director George got to show up. And of course, he brought his lovely wife with him, and we were really glad to have him because he is a legend in Parks and Wildlife. There is an S underneath that tie and shirt. But it brought up the discussion about not only just engaging our constituents, but also engaging the other boards like this one. And so our November commission and board meetings overlap. We'll be out in Burlington. We're not sure where you guys were going to be, but anyway, for 2019, the commission thought it'd be great if we could do a joint board commission meeting somewhere down the road and talk about areas of overlap. Certainly the agencies work very well together. But kind of making sure the board's priorities and the commission's priorities are heard, and maybe there's real opportunities for better working together. So anyway, I'll throw that out there and hopefully can work with Becky here pretty soon to see if we can find some time. Some of the retirements are longtime fish biologists and recent fish chief Doug Krieger retired. He's been replaced with Matt Nickel. Matt comes from our hatchery. He was our hatchery chief for 5 years, and we're really glad to have him in there as well. The other is our in-stream flow program coordinator. I don't know if you all, she's been here before, but I don't know if you've met her, Katie Birch. She's been on board since June. She's learning the ropes from Mr. Skinner over there. I think that's a good thing. But Jay is, I know, pulling the plug here soon. We're really glad he's staying on and he's helping us through the transition, because it is a very complex program. It's a big learning curve as well. So now we'll talk about fires, droughts, and floods. This has been a heck of a year, particularly for the western part of the state. Aaron talked a little bit about Lake Avery and those releases. We've had a mandatory fishing closure that was implemented on the Yampa River downstream of Stagecoach. That's been in effect since the middle of June and remains effective, but the total number of fishing closures we've had is 16 in the Northwest region. We're at 3 now, so that's good. But it was really a rough summer for the fish and for the recreational fishing opportunities. The Northeast region kind of survived probably the best of all of them. A couple fires had burned, but the Platte fishery remains pretty decent. It's still flowing, although those water levels are low. There's no real major concerns for us with regard to that fishery. The Southwest was obviously the other one hit very hard. Following the fire, then the monsoon rains came, and debris flows in the Hermosa and Animas River through Durango were pretty devastating to those fish. Widespread mortality, mostly browns or rainbows, rainbow trout and suckers that were lost. We're also seeing low stream flows and reservoir levels impacting the kokanee salmon spawn that is occurring in multiple basins. I think many of you have seen Blue Mesa reservoir levels, McPhee, Vallecito, and Lemon reservoirs. This is going to be rough on those salmon as well. And then some of the other impacts, I think during the time of low water levels, many water bodies are being drained to do repairs. It's kind of a good time to do that as well. So we've got some voluntary closures that are in place still in the Southwest. The Southeast is mostly in the drought impact there. Stressed fish, low flows, and rising temperatures. We had a voluntary fishing closure on the Arkansas River below Pueblo Dam. That is extending east to I-25, and that lasted till about the 4th of September. And south of Pikes Peak, Bear Creek flows remain low, and fish that pure greenback cutthroat trout appear to be tolerating the situation better than what we thought. So, and then, of course, with where those fish come from hatcheries, and a lot of our hatcheries are seeing very low water levels or low flows. We've been trying to update and make our hatcheries a little bit more efficient on production, but we're also sitting. It's like a store. You're sitting on a lot of stock, and we've got to unload those shelves before they perish. And so our Pitkin hatchery, we've cut the numbers, we'll be cutting the numbers of that winter holdover by about 30% during the winter. I'm just hoping for more water. The Durango hatcheries, we're going to cut the kokanee production by 40%. And what this all means is just next couple years is going to be not as good as it has been. But we figure that if this drought continues, we're going to probably lose a lot of fish that are in those hatcheries. So it's better to unload them now and let them get caught and fill some frying pans, hopefully. And the other part of the drought as well, certainly is the range impacts that are going on with grazing ungulates out there, domestic and wild. And I think this has really been a kudos to our people, that knowing that hunting seasons are going on right now, drought impacts have occurred all summer long, ranges are being destocked from domestic livestock, and then what do we do when the elk start to take off? And to avoid a conflict, what we're trying to do is implement measures that will allow, for example, and this hasn't passed yet, but we're contemplating this, is how do we minimize the elk that are out there on the range, and do our part to make sure that winter range and summer range can continue to be resilient. And so we're looking at ways to allow current license holders to take either species. Certainly if you go into a population reduction mode, harvesting the females of a population is how you do it, not the males. And so we're looking at certain areas of the state that are the most heaviest drought impacted, and allow hunters to say, well, if you've got a bull license, that okay, maybe now you can take a cow, and help us, because we know elk can impact the landscape as well, but in the drought conditions it's exacerbated, and try to minimize that impact to the land managers, but also those permittees that are out there as well. So, and we don't want to get into a head-butting situation come next spring and next summer, and if permittees are not allowed to go back out on the allotment, that's just a big problem. So we're trying to be proactive, keeping our fingers crossed for this winter, Mr. Chairman. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Director Broscheid. Any questions? All right. Thank you, directors, for your reports. We'll continue on with agenda item 6. That's update on community compliance with Colorado floodplain rules and regulations. And we have Stephanie DiPetito.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. Agenda item number 6 is to update you on the status of communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program and their compliance with the state's higher regulatory standards. I brought this item to you in January, and at that time we had 5 communities that were still non-compliant. I'm very happy to say that as of yesterday, and since the memo was issued, that we are down to 1 community. This is the City of Holyoke in the South Platte. And CWCB staff continues to provide technical assistance to the community, and they are in the process of updating their ordinance and should have all documentation to the CWCB by January 2019. At this time, I do want to thank all the board members who helped to facilitate conversations with communities and help to keep these communities on track. It made a huge difference, and we are set to have 100% compliance. At this point in time, I do not have any board action requested.
Thanks, Stephanie. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry that it was a couple of my cities.
Just one.
We'll continue on with agenda item 7, and that's temporary designation for best available floodplain data policy.
And so I'll also say this is Stephanie DiPetito, CWCB staff, for the record. I missed that on the last one. So agenda item number 7 is a follow-up to the discussion that was brought to the board in July. At that time, I brought forward the temporary designation of best available floodplain information. This policy would allow for the designation of floodplains in a temporary manner for 2 situations, one in post-disaster situations, and the second when preliminary information has been issued by FEMA but has not yet gone through the designation process. At the July board meeting, we had a discussion, and the board requested that the policy reflect that when we say the word floodplain, that also includes the floodway. That change was made to the policy, as you could see in your board memo, and at this time, the CWCB staff considers it final and is bringing it forward for adoption.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Do you have any questions for Stephanie? There is a staff recommendation before us. Director Wells.
I would move approval of staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 7. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Stephanie. And agenda item 8, you're going to stay up there for us. So state flood mitigation plan update.
So agenda item number 8 is also a follow-up to a discussion that was had in July at the board meeting. At that time, myself and our contractor from Wood, Chris Ide, brought a presentation to the board regarding an update to the state flood mitigation plan. The plan was last updated in 2013, and the plan reevaluated flood risk, vulnerability, reset mitigation actions and goals for the state, and it was done through a stakeholder-driven process. Since the July meeting, the plan was available on the CWCB website and open for a 30-day public comment period. The public comment period ended on August 15th, and all comments that were brought forward were addressed. At this time, the plan is considered final and is available on the CWCB homepage for review and download. And at this point, the CWCB board or staff is asking that it be adopted. Once adopted by the CWCB board, it will be added as an appendix to the all-state hazard mitigation plan and brought to the governor for adoption in December. So at this time, I'm requesting it be adopted.
Director George.
Thank you. I noticed you said that all of the comments that we received in the 30-day public comment period were addressed.
Yes.
Could you tell me more what you mean by addressed?
Most of them were grammatical. Some of them were data driven. So if a city, for example, the city of Aurora brought comments forward that had better data than what was included. So we reviewed it and included it within the plan. And other than that, we didn't receive any other comment other than from the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management and the CWCB. So there's only one local community that brought forward better information.
So is it fair to say that there was no comment that resulted in an unresolved controversy?
No, that is correct.
Nobody's unhappy?
Correct.
Okay, let's vote.
All right. Any other questions for Stephanie? All right, you have a staff recommendation before you. Director Wells.
I would move that the board adopt the 2018 updates to the state flood mitigation plan.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Gallagher, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Stephanie. Agenda item 9, state LIDAR plan update. We had a promise from Twee yesterday that she would update us on the LIDAR when we were in the finance committee meeting. And so she's going to do that now.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Twee Patton, CWCB staff. I'll be giving an update on the LIDAR plan. And I'm going to start with what is LIDAR, and instead of me talking, I'm going to show a quick video to give you an overview. That's not going to work. That's okay. I have a plan B. So, oh, okay.
What are we gonna do without you, Ryan? Just again. Yeah, put the microphone back.
It doesn't act on its own. It actually, LiDAR typically includes 3 independently operating technologies. There's a LiDAR, which is essentially a giant laser ranging device. That laser ranging device sends out millions of pulses. Today, they can send out over 400,000 pulses in 1 second. That technology gives you the distance or the range to the target. And there are 2 other technologies, GPS, which is Global Positioning System or Global Navigation Systems, that give you the location of the instrument that's holding that LiDAR sensor. And then the third technology is the Inertial Measurement Unit, which is an IMU system. And that system is used to measure the pitch, roll, and heading of for example, an airborne platform. It could also be installed on a mobile platform, like a car or a vehicle on the road. Or it could be a terrestrially mounted LiDAR system, such that it's just mounted on a tripod. And the reason why LiDAR is sometimes the preferred technology to use is that it can map the bare earth beneath vegetation better than most other technologies can.
Okay, that didn't go as planned, but I hope you got something out of the video. Basically, LiDAR is high quality topo data. And so that video is just kind of showing you how it's captured from the airplane. So. And this is the Wikipedia definition of what LiDAR is, so you can read that as well. And like I said, LiDAR is basically just high quality topographic data, which is needed for floodplain mapping purposes and other uses as well. So this picture just gives you some sample output data of what LiDAR looks like. It's pretty cool data. You can see the ground points, you can see buildings and trees. It's very detailed information that we use as the basis of our floodplain mapping activities. So I mentioned the different uses of LiDAR for floodplain mapping. We also use it for fluvial hazard mapping. Joe Busto uses it for snow depth calculations. And so the Colorado Geological Survey uses it for their purposes as well, for debris flow mapping. And the Forest Service uses LiDAR for their efforts for measuring forest canopy and things like that. And there's also agricultural uses for LiDAR as well. And this is just an example of how I use it for the floodplain mapping. Oops. So you see in the middle picture there, that's what the LiDAR looks like. We do our floodplain analysis, and then we end up with the final floodplain map as our product. And this is an example of a map that we put together for where all the wildfires have occurred over the years with the LiDAR coverage that we have in Colorado. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the plan. In 2015, shortly after the September 2013 floods, there was a big increase in the need for LiDAR in the state of Colorado. So there were a number of state and federal agencies that came together to help prioritize the need for LiDAR, where we should capture it in Colorado. And so from those meetings, this is the priority plan that we came up with. It is a moving target because as the need changes in Colorado, then the priority changes. But because that plan was put in place in 2015, FEMA received some additional funding in 2016, and the CWCB received a grant for $3.4 million for LiDAR acquisition. And this map just kind of shows you what those priority areas are. The outline of those regions are in black. And so based on our priority plan, the southwest area was our highest need. But because of weather conditions, capturing LiDAR is very dependent on the weather and also the timing of when we received our funding. So we actually moved our priority elsewhere, and I'll show that a little bit later, but that was our highest priority at the time that we created this plan. I found this map, and I thought it was important to show because what it's showing you here is the LiDAR coverage in the country. And so you can see on the eastern side, they have very good LiDAR coverage, but as you move west, there's not as much coverage here as we move further west in the country. This is an overview map of the LiDAR that we have captured thus far. And so you see we're making good headway on covering the entire state of Colorado. So our most recent acquisition is shown in the peach color. You can see that, but it's in the peach color, basically Weld County all the way down to Huerfano County. So we captured that data, and we're now in the post-processing stage of that data acquisition. This map shows you all the partners that we've worked with in our LiDAR acquisition projects. So we've gotten a lot of local support and funding as well. And this shows you the funding breakdown. So as you can see, our funding mainly comes from FEMA and the USGS. In 2015, the state OIT office received $2 million. And so that was a big chunk of money that went towards the efforts for our LiDAR acquisition as well. And then we've received funding from local communities from the different counties, as well as Castle Rock and DIA were a couple of recent partners in their latest acquisition. And then we also received funding from the Division of Reclamation and Mining. They wanted to capture an area in Huerfano County, so we added that to our scope of work as well. And this is the map showing you our priority areas moving forward. So as I mentioned, that southwest area was our highest priority. We recently had some discussions with the USGS and NRCS, and they had some additional funding that they needed to use before the end of their fiscal year, which is the end of this month. And so they've decided to capture the southwest area. And so we're moving our priority to the area in Montrose, Gunnison, and then in the southeast. We also have plans to capture LiDAR in the Park County area as well. If anyone is interested in obtaining this data, as I mentioned yesterday, we're working with OIT. They're coming up with a platform where people can view the data on a map and then download it directly from that site. These are very large data sets, and so it's a very complicated process. So in the meantime, what we have is on our Colorado Hazard Mapping website, we have a tab that says LiDAR request. You click on that, you fill out a form, and then it goes to OIT, and then they fill that request. And that's taking about 4 to 6 weeks to get that data at this time. But once that new platform is out, it'll be an immediate download from their website. And that's pretty much all I have for the LiDAR update.
All right, thanks, Thuy. Are there any questions? Director Dutton.
Thank you for that update. For the areas where there's LiDAR coverage, but your partners have collected it, not this agency.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Is the data, will that data also be available on the OIT website? And it's an additional question to that. When people request the data, is it available raw, or is it the DEMs that they will be getting?
Okay, so there are partners, so they've actually given the CWCB funding, and so we manage the program. So there are partners, but we actually house and administer the acquisitions. And so the data is available as raw outputs or as DEMs. It kind of depends. They have to specifically request DEMs, but we do have that available.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Thuy? Director Gallagher.
Thank you for your presentation, Thuy. Is this available just to see in raw form on the site, or do you have to get a data set in order to download it or a CD or?
So what
You were
we've been
mentioning
doing.
terabytes.
Yes.
Which
what-
is a rather frightening kind.
It is, and I can't even imagine how big the file is. But what we've been doing is purchasing hard drives in the terabyte size, and then it's not the best method for delivering data, but we send the hard drive to the customer, and then they send the hard drive back when they're done. So we're trying to improve on that part of it, of how we manage the data. So.
I see. Okay. So generally, it's not really for sort of casual observation.
That's correct, unless it's
no portal in there for the
right.
casual observer.
Well, that's what OIT is coming up with is a portal for people to view where the areas where it's available. But in order to actually view the data, you have to have special programs.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tui? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tui. We're coming up on our break. We're a little bit early, but that's okay. So we'll go ahead and take our break, and it was scheduled for 10 minutes, but I think we can do 15, and we'll be back here promptly to begin at 10:15. All right. Thanks. We're going to continue now with agenda item 10, the Lower Boulder Creek floodway update, and we have Twee going to update us on that. Welcome again, Twee.
Last board meeting when we did designations, the Boulder Creek floodway. So since the last board meeting, we've been working very diligently on the reviewers.
Sorry, my mic was not on. So since the last board meeting, we've been working very diligently with FEMA to get their approval on the Boulder Creek floodway. And before I get to the staff recommendation, I just want to note that the FEMA contractor who reviewed the study is a nationally recognized expert on the subject. I also want to acknowledge and express sympathetic awareness to the residents impacted by this. However, I do want to remind the board that we would be violating statutory responsibility if we don't move forward with this designation, especially now that we have approval from FEMA's contractors. And this is consistent with what we have brought forward to the board at the last board meeting. So the staff recommendation is that the board designate the 2D floodway reach for Boulder Creek from Kenosha Road at 115th Street to the Weld County line. We have obtained written concurrence from FEMA that their comments have been addressed adequately. And the state's mapping contractor who is with me today has also provided us with a written statement that the study is technically sound and does not expect any significant changes along this reach.
Thank you. Thank you, Twee. Are there any questions for Twee? We heard about this at the last meeting, so thank you for your work on this and for carrying it through, and we appreciate it very much. So we have a staff recommendation. Director Wells. Oh, I also need to ask if there's any public comment about this out there. Okay, thank you. Director Wells.
Yeah, Twee, I just wondered how staff will or has responded to the letter that we received from the property owners in the floodplain.
So we are working on a response to the homeowners, and at this time we haven't responded to them, but we're still working on those responses and we'll be addressing their concerns. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
So what I believe one of their concerns was that we wait until FEMA designates it to make our decision. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that was one of their concerns, and because Boulder County has been very proactive in their efforts to make the community more resilient and protect the citizens, they've requested that we designate before that happens. And since we have designated other reaches for Boulder County, and now that we know that, that this study is technically sound and we have that approval, we're going to move forward with the recommendation to designate.
Director Chartrand.
Tweed, earlier, did you make the statement that the board had a legal obligation to act upon this today?
I said that the board has a statutory responsibility to designate. I don't think I said today, but that is what I am recommending that the board do today is to designate that floodway.
So I just want to clarify that I haven't had an opportunity to consider whether the board has a statutory obligation to act today or not. So I wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we have a staff recommendation before us. What is your pleasure? Director George.
I'll move staff recommendations.
Second.
It's been moved by Director George, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 10. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Tui. All right, next agenda item is agenda item 11, the 2013 flood 5-year anniversary. And we have Chris Sturm with us today. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning. My name is Chris Sturm, for the record, Watershed and Flood Protection Section. Kevin Houck is not with us today to do this presentation. He sends his regrets. Unfortunately, his mother-in-law passed away this past weekend, and our thoughts are certainly with him and his family. So I'm going to do my best to get through the update here. This is just an informational item. And I did hand out a program document. It's multi-pages. It should be in front of you. And the presentation is going to roughly follow that program document. It's been 5 years since the floods. I think a lot of people, if you ask them where they were in September of 2013, they will remember. I certainly remember. I was here at a conference for a bunch of stormwater and floodplain managers. There was a certain amount of irony in that, and that most of the people that needed to deal with the flood were in Steamboat and not on the Front Range. But I think that a lot of us that have been involved in this heavily over the last 5 years mark time by those days before the flood and the days after. Things will never be the same. And Kevin has a good quote here that's included in the document. And that it was a new way of doing business. And in the context of how he said it, I think, was that this was a new way for the flood hazard mitigation community to be doing business. But this was not a new way for the CWCB to be doing business. And I think that's why we were tapped to lead the stream recovery efforts for the Front Range that was affected by these floods. We needed to, and this is cut off. Andrew, can you help with the projector just a little bit to get the bullets all the way on the screen, please? But really, after the floods, Tom Browning came into my office. If I could do it all over again, I would have run when he showed up. He asked me if I would lead this effort, and I agreed. And I immediately looked to what we've already created out of the Watershed Restoration Program. And that was protect life and property while restoring ecological processes that connect land and water. We don't think that multi-objectives are value add. We think that protecting life and property can be done by implementing multi-objectives, that they go together well. And I'll be talking about that as we get into the presentation. We wanted to do this at a watershed scale, so transcend political boundaries. Support early planning so that we knew where our problem areas were and that we could justify the need for federal funding. This recovery effort was in the hundreds of millions of dollars when all things were considered, and certainly not in the scope of what the state could pay for. And we wanted to do this through a stakeholder-driven collaborative, which is something that we've been doing for over a decade in the realm of this type of work, and something that is supported in our water plan as well, in Chapter 7.1. The projects were to be implemented with multi-objectives, again, very new for the flood hazard mitigation community, and then incorporate resiliency into every project. And resiliency seems to be a buzzword these days that a lot of people use in different ways, but there are many scientists and engineers in the room, and we have definitions for this. And resiliency in the context that I'm discussing is the ability for a watershed or a reach of stream or an area to experience some kind of disturbance and either not have any issues or be able to recover quickly. I think we can all relate to what happens post-fire. We've seen a lot of them over the last several years. And what we're not seeing there is resiliency. What we're seeing is a disturbance, And then we're seeing a threshold boundary being crossed. And when a threshold boundary in an ecosystem gets crossed, that means structure and function is compromised. And in our forest, what does that mean? What does structure mean? Well, the forests don't look the same, and they take a long time to regenerate, and possibly don't regenerate the way that we're used to seeing them. Other things that are structured, the very makeup of the soil changes. And what does that affect? That affects function. And for us, hydrologic regime is the big one. And when that's affected, a lot of things are affected. Our ability to divert water and the timing and amounts that we're used to diverting changes, and that can have impacts on our economy. So our goals were very similar to the previous slide. This document in front of you is set up so that anybody can open it to any page and just start from there. But we actually sat down with our federal partners and our technical teams and our state partners and said, let's formalize what our goals are for this recovery effort. And I will mention here, our primary partner in this effort over the last 5 years has been DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, and within that department, the Division of Local Government. They've been a very strong partner with us. We've shared one technical team that was set up to support capacity in the watersheds. And then the CWCB has a technical team that actually administrated a lot of the work that we did. We provided designers to design projects, and we provided folks to oversee the construction of those projects as well. So we've had very robust technical support throughout this whole process. The timeline, of course, the floods happened in September 2013, and there was emergency response immediately and even during the floods. The master planning began almost right away as well. Again, I was approached by the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Did I get that right, Twee? DHSEM. And they asked that, will CWC be willing to administrate some money to help these communities start planning? We agreed to that. So we had $2.5 million released through a special release of the Watershed Restoration Program to get communities started in their master planning. We had formed 7 or 8 different watershed coalitions and built capacity in a couple others to get going on this before the end of 2013 and had them master planning by all of them by January 2014. And they matched the money that we provided 1-for-1 with local sources. Oops. And then in 2014 and 2015, there was a lot of project scoping, identifying the projects, prioritizing them, scoping them, still not fully realizing where the funding is going to come from. This was a period that was probably the most difficult for me personally, in that we had a lot of support, we thought, for this coalition idea. We certainly had it at the state level. The local communities weren't quite on board. And I got called into the governor's office several times over this to explain our strategy. Realizing that that was just playing catch up, this is where we started talking to DOLA. And I asked DOLA, will you set up meetings for us, CWCB, to give presentations to local elected officials, county administrators, high-level local government staff, so that we can explain our strategy? And that's when things really started clicking. So much so that that's when DOLA really liked what we were proposing, and they got involved with some of the HUD money. They call it CDBGDR. You could tell I'm familiar with that. Community Development Block Grants for Disaster Recovery. And HUD approved a watershed resilience pilot program, the first ever for DOLA to administrate. And so then we were a partner with DOLA through an MOU to support them technically in the grants they were providing for that. In 2016, we really got into a lot of our design and permitting. This is kind of, I think, a feel-good presentation, so I won't belabor some of the difficulties here, but let's just say that permitting can take as much time or more time than designing, which takes more time than implementation in most cases. Major construction, we started building things in 2014. We partnered with CDOT for the construction of Highway 36 out of Alliance to Estes. We did the river work, they did the road work. It was a great partnership. It was a great demonstration project for a lot of folks that were looking at bigger implementation. But really the bulk of the over 70 million in actual construction costs for river projects started in 2017, and then major construction was completed in 2018. There's a few more projects that DOLA is sponsoring right now, and we're continuing to support them technically, and the CWCB has one more project that should be done before the end of the year. So watershed coalition building, like I said, most of these coalitions had to be formed. I think a lot of the board has seen this before. The left-hand group already existed, and the rest of them were created because of the floods. It was quite a task to get them going. They organized the stakeholders. They managed money from many different sources. They shepherded permits and environmental compliance. I have certain words in gray up there because those were gray areas. There was a lot of hand holding from the state, from the CWCB's technical assistance team to get these guys over those hurdles. The designers and contractors, we gave them a choice for the biggest program that we administrated and said, we will design the projects for you and we will provide those designers to do the construction oversight. I would say over half of the projects were done through our team, but other parties chose, and usually it was the local government, the county implemented projects where they chose to hire their own designers and do it that way. So a couple different ways to pull that off. And now we are partnering with many of these coalitions to monitor the projects. I tell folks out there we've got a $70 million classroom and we need to take advantage of what we can learn from it. The master planning really defined each watershed's vision. Each one looked a little different. It enhanced their understanding of what had happened and what their future risks are and what they can mitigate and what they cannot. We're not saying that we built all these projects to make you flood proof from a next 2013 event. So a big part of this was the explanation of the risk that people have, especially those in close proximity to the river and its floodplains. The master plans provided conceptual designs that evolved through time and cost estimates that also evolved through time. When I got into this, I thought that a reasonable estimate for river work was $100 a linear foot. I saw estimates in master plans that were $300 a linear foot. At the time, I wanted to throw those out. All said and done, we implemented some projects that were over $400 a linear foot. So it was a very big effort, and we learned a lot. I think the most important thing that these master plans did was they prioritized projects. When you're working at a watershed scale with stakeholders and you've got a lot of different interests and you're moving across political boundaries, prioritization is essential. Everybody has a strong argument for their need, but the watershed group has to come together and decide on what the most important projects are to protect the entire watershed. These master plans demonstrated to the feds that the state of Colorado had it together. And this is how we got a lot of money from the NRCS to come in later phases of recovery. So different funding programs, the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program, the CWCB administrated that for the NRCS. That was over a $60 million program. The Watershed Resilience Pilot Program, I discussed that earlier, the DOLA-led effort. In many cases, the projects were funded by both funding sources. We got a lot of criticism for that because there was different federal compliance associated with these different projects. But in many cases, there was no source of local cash match. And for some reason, that CDBG-DR money would be considered local cash match. So we had no choice in the end but to mix these two programs together. And then we had Senate Bill 14179, which the board administrated for stream restoration. And there were other programs as well. Jonathan gave me some information about the loan program. The CWCB out of the gate had a zero interest loan program. There were 20 emergency loans contracted. $40 million was advertised. 23.5 million was contracted. 13.3 million has been dispersed to date. There's 2 projects that are still under construction, and it looks like at the end of this, about $18 million will actually be dispersed. A lot of the engineering for those emergency repairs to divergent structures was pretty conservative, and they were able to come in under cost on those. Okay, by the numbers, I think this is pretty compelling here. A lot of us like to see the numbers. There were over 117 total flood recovery projects. Total construction was 70 million. When you build in engineering, permitting, design, capacity building, we're north of 100 million on this. Over $270 million was the value of what we protected. Now, we were only able to calculate this for the NRCS EWP program, so I suspect this is north of 300 million and possibly deeper into there. But that's the whole cost benefit, and I believe that some of the directors were talking about this yesterday on what value are we getting out of our projects. Well, the feds made us show what value we were protecting before they approved the funding. So we went through these calculations. 65 million miles of rivers and floodplain improvements, 12 watershed master plans, dozens of planning efforts. Those include conceptual and detailed designs, over 700 private property owners engaged. That may have been one of the most difficult efforts we pulled off. After the floods, one of the criticisms we got from local government was, why are you, state of Colorado, not sending all the money to us? And I would show up and meet with some counties and say, well, show me where your projects are. Let's talk about where the damage is. And what I would see is a lot of damage on county-owned properties. And I'd say, well, what about the locals, the private landowners? Not a whole lot on that. Hence the Watershed Coalition approach. We pulled off some really big projects with dozens of landowners for one project. Would have never done it without our coalitions and without the staff that led those coalitions. $4.2 million from the HUD program that DOLA led to support capacity in the coalitions we created. That paid for staff. If you're gonna get work like this done, people need to get paid, and that's important. You can't pull something off at this level with a bunch of volunteers sitting at a collaborative table. And the CWCB augmented that $4.2 million with $400,000. The federal money that came in will not pay for fundraising and grant writing, and we thought it critical for these groups to go out and find other sources of funding beyond what we had to offer. So that was about 10% of their time, about 10% of their salaries. This watershed approach, not only protecting life and property, but we think we can protect life and property and also address ecological concerns. We really thought hard about doing no harm first. There's a informal Hippocratic oath amongst river designers, geomorphologists, and engineers. And that's, if you go into a stream and throw a bunch of riprap somewhere to protect somebody's property, that may in the short term very well do that very well. It oftentimes transfers energy downstream and causes erosion on someone else's property. So we took a very thoughtful approach to our design so that we wouldn't transfer problems to other areas. So that feeds into the next bullet, really respecting the geomorphic processes of rivers. A lot of what we heard was, we need to design this so we move sediment through this system. Anybody who's ever been up the Big Thompson Canyon knows that that stream is pretty steep, but there are a couple areas where the gradient flattens out. And if you're going to try to design to move sediment through areas that are lower gradient, you're not listening to the river's natural tendency. So we respected that, and we designed our projects to hold sediment where it naturally will be held, but to do it in a way where we can protect life and property. Again, a lot of our multi-objectives, they go beyond the science and engineering. A lot of these projects actually help the communities get their economies going again. They rely on tourism. They rely on direct connections for tourism to the rivers. Boating, fishing, incredibly important. And then all the indirect activities that go along with that. we really wanted to enhance the riparian ecosystem beyond what was there before. What I heard from one of my designers, an ecologist, was there's a lot of monocultures of coyote willow out there. I didn't know that it has less sugar in it than other types of willows. So in the early days of grazing, a lot of cattle selectively graze the other types of willows. Well, these areas are not necessarily used for agriculture anymore. They're very much suburbanized. So we thought, what a unique opportunity to impart more diversity into our riparian species. We partnered with the Colorado State Forest Service. We collected seeds from the areas that were impacted, and we grew the material in our own nursery. We did not have enough material at the start of this to cover it, and we were looking at going to other states and bringing their plants into our state. We didn't want that. When I approached the feds, it said, how can we start growing plants today for projects that are starting next year? I got an answer, and they were very honest, and I respected it. And the answer was, Chris, we don't do out of the box. And I said, well, we do. And I approached my boss, who took it up the chain. I approached Kevin, and he took it up the chain. And CWCB was able to pre-fund the nursery to start growing all that material so it would be ready when we needed it. And we're continuing that relationship with them by looking at buying some cold storage so that we actually have seed stock on hand for future disaster events. Because just the permitting alone to collect the seeds was very difficult to get. We think this is a model for other communities, which is why we created this booklet. And I hope that you will take the time to read it. And I hope that you won't just put it in the recycling bin when you're done with it. I'd love it if you'd pass it around within your own organizations or just leave it on a table somewhere where it can get picked up. Because we think that we've really shifted a paradigm on how we approach these types of recovery efforts, definitely in the state of Colorado. But we would like this to be bigger. We'd like this to go out the Rocky Mountain region and out on a national scale. Our partners pulled off some pretty amazing things. It wasn't just the state. There were a lot of nonprofits involved. There were a lot of coalitions involved, state agencies and federal agencies, as well as water districts. And we've created some amazing resources. One of them is in front of you. We have an entire website that we're going to keep active for the next several years. It's coloradoewp.com. The resource page has a litany of resources that we've put together: biostabilization manuals, revegetation matrices, a couple of documents that came out of this for the general public that I think are especially powerful are the Stream Stewardship and Recovery Handbook. And that's a handbook for people in Colorado that live along our waterways. And it is very much Science 101, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. And that was led through one of our local coalitions, as well as the Resilient Crossings Manual. A lot of the flood damage that we saw, I would have people that would come to me as a geomorphologist to be like, well, the river's going to do what it wants to do. And I'm like, well, the river actually wanted to go down its waterway, but our undersized crossings to private landowners forced it to make dramatic turns and carve into property that should have never been touched. And so a lot of the damage we saw was simply because of undersized culverts, too many crossings. Everybody wants their own bridge to their own house. We really need to get together and neighbor up on this and have a bridge that can adequately move floodwaters underneath it and provides access to multiple homeowners. So we think that's a great document that will have a legacy moving forward. You have this flood program summary in front of you. We did one for each. Heinz, can I get a little help with that, please? Should I just hit okay? We created a program document for each watershed, and we think these are going to be very powerful documents for those coalitions so that they can maintain their capacity through time. Those are available at coloradoewp.com, and you can click on success stories and get in and read further about those individual watersheds. We also created close to 2 dozen success stories that were individual project stories. And they start off and just kind of talk about what happened, what the benefits were, give a little bit of geographic context, discuss objectives, discuss what was actually installed. They give before and after pictures. They talk about the ecological benefits. They acknowledge all the people that were involved in it. I'm proud to say every one of these has CWCB's name on it. And then they talk about the budget. And we didn't get into what agency did what. They're really geared for the local public. So they break it down by local sources, state sources, and federal sources. Yes.
Sorry. In those before and after pictures that you had on the last one, were those so before the flood or post-flood before the restoration?
For the project.
Okay.
In most cases, and our captions describe when it was. We tried to get stuff that was immediately after the flood because that really just makes it dramatic. But those pictures were hard to come by. And so it was after the flood, but in some cases it was several years after the flood, the before picture.
So I believe I've heard some recommendations from folks that had dealt with the flood directly about taking pictures of your infrastructure before a disaster hit, because that would be helpful in the permitting. Is that accurate, or am I misremembering?
That is accurate.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be very helpful. And we're actually hunting pictures down like that.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Moving forward, you know, we've all done great things in this room, and I think great people continue to do great things, and that's what we're trying to do as a section. We're not resting on our laurels, and Twee and Stephanie are going to be up here in a few minutes to talk about some of the programs moving forward, but they're all under the umbrella of our hazard mapping program. And I will just mention quickly that Stephanie's going to talk about the fluvial hazard zone mapping pilot program. Right out of the gate after the floods, the very first document we created discussed fluvial hazards, how rivers behave. We thought it'd be a great document to get out to the landowners out there to explain why this happened. And now we're coming full circle on it by providing guidance about living in the fluvial hazard zone. So just a few before and after pictures, and then Twee will come up, and then Stephanie. We started looking at these before and after pictures, and I was getting really disappointed in my team because it wasn't abundantly clear what we were looking at. Some of our projects, I think, were done so well that you can go out there and look at them and not know that there was a project. So I said, let's put some captions on here and show people what they're looking at. And like in number 1 here, there was massive sediment removal. That was common to a lot of projects. We can't reconnect this channel to its floodplain if we don't remove a lot of sediment. And that's really important for a lot of function. And I've talked about this before. If you think of a Kachina doll, how each one is nested within the other, that's what we did with our stream channels. A low flow channel nested into an average flow channel, nested into a bankful channel, nested into a flood conveyance channel. We think this is important for a lot of reasons, including water storage. I'd love to have this conversation with some of you, but if we can capture peak flows on our floodplain and charge our alluvial aquifer, I think we can increase base flows. And we actually have some science on that. In number 2, we incorporated a lot of large wood structures. There were a lot of trees with root wads left over after the flood, and I chased down everybody I possibly could and had my team doing the same to say, please don't chainsaw all of that wood up, because we're going to put it right back in those rivers to stabilize them and improve habitat. That word got out so well that we actually had $60,000 worth of trees and root wads stolen off a project site over a weekend. And that is a big operation. That requires at least 2 pieces of yellow equipment to pull off. So we suspect we have some suspects out there, but it was very interesting to have trees stolen off a site. Another one, Waltonia on the Big Thompson project. The channel was realigned for better protection of homes. We constructed riffle pools and boulder cascades to provide a more complex channel. This is great for habitat, and Director Broscheid knows this. This is also great for flood hazard mitigation. What you can't see in these pictures are that third dimension. And what happened after the floods is a lot of the material in the rivers was actually mined in the emergency phase for the temporary roadways. We had to get that complexity back in. Complex channels dissipate energy, and that is incredibly important for stream function. We created bankful benches where we could. Let's see here. And, well, we got the numbers there. Number 3, so that we were able to promote some riparian areas, even in a tight canyon corridor. And then the banks are protected with rock, and oftentimes we covered that in topsoil so that you can't see the riprap, which was really important to a lot of the stakeholders in the canyon, knowing all the tourism and people driving up into Estes that value the scenery. So a little bit of fun here, a little bit of levity. There's been some before and after for projects, but there's also been some before and after with people. This has not been easy for a lot of folks. I wish I had all my consultants up on this one. But, you know, I was a young, well-shaven fella 5 years ago. And 117 projects does take its toll. And that's the proving ground right there. If you're not out on site, you don't know if the innovation is being implemented. And if you're not watching the innovation being implemented, you can't advise other people on lessons learned while it's being implemented. I personally went to most every site that we had construction on, and many of those projects several times. So, you know, I have a 5-year projection here, especially if Director Mitchell, we stay in the disaster recovery game, which it looks like we are. It could take its toll, and I'm wondering if I might adopt a different management style. It's a little more aggressive. I love this picture of Kevin. This is 5 years ago. He's a young guy. He still has his hair, but it's a different color. And this was like watching it change daily. And the 5-year projection on this doesn't look too good. One more before and after. I think this one really demonstrates some of the work that we were able to do. Many of the channels look like this post-flood, completely disconnected from the floodplain, unstable banks. What you can't see here is a trail and a roadway that are at risk of falling in the river. So there was a lot of sediment removal. We were able to create some backwater pools, again, respecting the hydrograph. A lot of flood designers before this were used to just designing for a 10-year event or a 25-year event. And our message to them was, you're going to design for the entire hydrograph. And what does that mean? That means as the hydrograph peaks and starts to drop, if we can form these little backwater areas, we're better equipped to support habitat, to support our fishery, and to be able to attenuate future flood flows. I really like this one in number 5 there. We've got riprap. It still is incredibly important in future events to protect this trail and this roadway. So the riprap is there, but it's buried. And so in a future flood, we may lose some of that soil there, but the riprap would be exposed and still doing its job. I really want to thank you guys. This board facilitated this program. It was built on the foundation of the Watershed Restoration Program. Kevin and I discussed this before I came here yesterday, and that we truly believe that our success, a lot of our success was founded on our leadership, and that we always felt support. It was oftentimes very contentious out there in the field. We met a lot of folks that disagreed with us. But we always had support when we came back to the CWCB and DNR and the state. So thank you guys very much. And now I'll ask Twee to come up and do her presentation.
Good morning, Twee Patton, CWCB staff. I'll be giving an update on the Colorado Hazard Mapping Program. I did hand out a one-page brochure. It's not as fancy as Chris's, but gives you a little timeline of the CHAMP program. And so I'm going to go over that timeline to give you an overview of the program. We start with the flood event in September of 2013. In early 2014, the Colorado Department of Transportation, in partnership with the CWCB, reevaluated the hydrology in the post-flood areas. Shortly after that, in the summer of 2014, the Colorado Stream Recovery Steering Committee, otherwise known as the Stream Team, was formed, and that committee was consisted of state and federal agencies, and they focused on stream recovery of the flood-impacted areas. But this committee was really the catalyst in developing the policy behind CHAMP. In early 2015, the General Assembly directed the CWCB through Senate Bill 15245 to re-examine the flood risks throughout the flood-affected areas. And then the program began in July of 2015. It was a 3-year program, and we started out with kickoff meetings with the flood-impacted communities. So since then, we've been working on the analysis, and this past winter through this summer, we've been meeting with the communities to hold flood risk review meetings and basically giving them a sneak peek of what their updated flood risks are post-flood. So we anticipate starting in the spring that we're going to transition CHAMP into the FEMA flood risk map program, which is the traditional flood mapping program that I've been managing for the last 10 years with FEMA. And so we're going to transition into that program and eventually go through the regulatory map update process to develop the regulatory FEMA flood insurance rate maps. And we anticipate those maps to start finalizing in the winter of 2020. So that's basically the timeline of CHAMP and moving into the risk map program. This slide just shows you some of the partners in that stream team. It doesn't show all of them, but it gives you an idea of all the different agencies that were involved. As I mentioned, CDOT and CWCB updated the hydrology, and this map gives you an overview of what the flood magnitude was during the September 2013 event. Shortly after the flood, FEMA came through and funded a LiDAR acquisition through the flood-impacted communities, and you see that in the gray shading is where the LiDAR collection took place. And then in early 2014, the Corps of Engineers came back again and flew LiDAR along the stream corridors that were most impacted by the flood, and that's shown in the light green shading. With those components, we use that data in our CHAMP efforts. Senate Bill 15245 is shown here. We received a total of $6.87 million, and as you can see, a large portion of that was set aside for the floodplain mapping update in those post-flood impacted areas. We also set aside money for other communities around Colorado that are still utilizing paper maps, and that's the $750,000. And the erosion zone mapping, which Stephanie will talk about, she received $700,000 for that effort. And then we also had some additional money for project management and for data acquisition, and that included another LiDAR acquisition that took place. So this map gives you an overview of the reaches that we studied in those areas that were most impacted. All in all, we had about 700 stream miles that were reanalyzed, and this is the largest map update effort that has ever taken place in Colorado. So now I'll just talk a little bit about the highlights and challenges of CHAMP. As I mentioned, this is the largest mapping update that has taken place in the state. And with that, we're studying a large number of areas, and we see a wide range of changes in the flood risk from very minor to very significant changes. And so with that, we have to tailor our outreach and our communication with the community officials and describe what we're doing and let them understand why some areas are seeing more significant changes than others. We have multiple stakeholders. We're working with watershed coalitions, local communities, counties, other state and federal agencies as well. And we also worked with Chris and his group in trying to incorporate their EWP projects into our CHAMP work and vice versa. So if there's data that we could leverage for them, for their efforts, we try to coordinate that to eliminate duplication of work. We also incorporated a lot of local recovery efforts that were going on as well. And another challenge I wanted to mention is the fact that we went from 1D to 2D hydraulic modeling, especially for the floodways, as mentioned in the earlier agenda item for Boulder Creek. Colorado is really leading the way in innovative technologies, and so that definitely was a big challenge for CHAMP. This map just shows you some of the EWP projects in our study area that we incorporated. I think we had a total of 32 EWP projects that we were able to incorporate into our analysis. The next couple of slides, I just want to show you a couple of areas where we see that significant flood risk change based on the work that we've done through CHAMP. So this area is the Little Thompson and Big Thompson confluence near Milliken. And the dark blue line that you see is what the effective FEMA maps show currently in that area. And so with our efforts utilizing that updated hydrology and updated LIDAR information, the new flood risk is now shown in the light blue shaded area. So you can see there's a significant impact in this area. And we are, again, working with the communities, notifying them early on and making them aware of what these flood risks will look like in a couple of years when they become the effective FEMA flood insurance rate maps. The area in the red outline is the old floodway delineation, and the red hatched line is the new floodway delineation through this area. Again, very significant changes in this particular location. And in each area, it kind of depends on what's going on, but mainly it was because of that updated hydrology and the increase in flows that we were seeing through these locations. And that's why we see the significant change in the flood risk. This is the St. Vrain Creek at Longmont. Again, the old floodplain is shown in the dark blue line outline, and the updated flood risk through our CHAMP efforts is shown in the light blue shading. And the same thing with the red outline, some floodway delineation there, and the updated floodways in the red hatched area. Yes.
I was just wondering, do you go out and look at where the floodwaters were during 2013? Do you look at any of that, or is this all just modeling? No,
there is survey work that was done post-flood. And I did look at some aerials right after the flood that were flown by Ayers and Associates, the consulting firm that I think we contracted with them. And I compared that to the effective FEMA floodplains. And in some locations, you actually see a very close correlation to what that 100-year flood was. And so it was very interesting to see. But we did have people out in the ground and surveying and looking at data as well.
Okay, thanks.
And this area, I just want to show Buckhorn Creek at Masonville is just an area that we didn't see as much significant change. Again, you see the blue outline is the FEMA effective floodplain, and the light blue shading is the post-flood delineation. So in this area, not as significant of a change. Now I'll just talk a little bit about our outreach and coordination efforts. As I mentioned, we have a lot of stakeholders involved. And so there were a lot of public meetings and outreach efforts going on. We really relied on the local community to tell us how much outreach that they needed. And so some communities didn't want to do the outreach now, and other communities wanted, a dozen public meetings right now. And so we definitely assisted and helped them with those efforts. We also held quarterly meetings with the communities and send out quarterly newsletters to give them updates of our progress. And we developed the Colorado Hazard Mapping and Risk Map portal, which is shown here. I highly recommend, if you have some free time, to go check it out. There's great information on here. We just revamped it to make it more user-friendly. And so you see on the top row there are the different components of CHAMP. As mentioned, we have the floodplain mapping, we have the fluvial hazard and debris flow mapping components in CHAMP. And so you can get all the information on this website. There's interactive maps on the website. So all the survey data that was taken, all that information can be downloaded from the site. And it shows you where those points were taken on the ground as well. And we also have a frequently asked question portion of the website where we we tend to have similar questions that are asked of us, so we put it on the website for people to view, and any of the meeting minutes and resources from those quarterly meetings are also on the website for people to view and access and download for their own use. So the next steps, as I mentioned in the timeline, we are now past the FEMA reviews, or still kind of finalizing that process. And then we will transition into risk map. So we anticipate the preliminary FEMA maps to be distributed sometime in the spring, summer of 2019, if all goes well. And then after that, we go into the post-prelim, or an appeal, where there's an appeal period. And that's when the public can view the maps, and they can comment on it and provide additional data, technical data that may revise the maps further. And then sometime in 2020 to 2021 is when we anticipate the new effective FEMA maps to be rolled out. So our typical risk map projects, when we receive funding from FEMA on an annual basis, we typically update a county at a time. And so this map just shows you for the CHAMP efforts, we're updating 7 counties at once, and that entails 233 FEMA flood map panels. And so it's a very significant effort with this map update. So now I'll talk a little bit about the funding. So this chart shows you our typical funding from FEMA. And as you can see, in years past, we average about $1 million in FEMA funding for map project updates. Since the flood, we have received a lot of support and additional funding from FEMA, which I hoped we would. And so you can see, starting in 2016, we went from $742,000 received from FEMA in 2015 to $4.1 million that we received from FEMA. And this year, we will be receiving $5.4 million from FEMA for projects. And lastly, I just want to say that a state-funded and state-managed flood map programs are pretty rare in the country. We're not the first, but I can say that I'm pretty sure that we are the only award-winning mapping program in the country. So earlier this year, the Colorado chapter of the American Council of Engineering Companies acknowledged the impact that CHAMP had on the state and awarded us with an honor award. So, and that's all I have. I think we'll move on to Stephanie.
Hello again. So the final piece that I'll be presenting on today is the Fluvial Hazard Zone Mapping Program. And that, as Twee and Chris had both mentioned, is... Oh, I'm Stephanie DiPetito, CWCB staff for the record. I'm managing the Fluvial Hazard Zone Mapping Program. So as Twee and Chris both mentioned, this is a component of that Colorado Hazard Mapping Program. But before I get too far into it, I'd like to first define what I mean by a fluvial hazard zone. And this is the area a stream has occupied in recent history, could occupy, or could physically influence as it stores and transports sediment and debris. And the objective of mapping this zone is to identify lands most vulnerable to these hazards. And after the 2013 flood, we saw a number of damages that were caused by this type of hazard. And what I want to point out on this picture is that in the blue, you see the FEMA flood insurance rate map inundation zone identified. So this is the area that flood water inundates, meaning that is the water surface where flood water comes in. But what that zone doesn't take into consideration is naturally occurring river processes such as aggradation and degradation or erosion. So on the St. Vrain, which is pictured here near Lyons, we see where this flood inundation map was being regulated to. However, it completely misses these houses outside. And what we do see is that the flood water moved completely into a channel, which it was like a path of least resistance. That's where the energy it was easiest to transport to. So it became very clear that though we had one tool in our toolbox for regulating flood risk, we didn't have a comprehensive understanding of all flood-related risk. In fact, we see about 25% of flood insurance claims nationwide that are filed outside of that flood insurance rate map area. And in the 2013 flood, about 51% of those claims came from outside of the firm panel. We're not saying that all of those claims were associated with fluvial hazards. However, we think it was a major component. And for us to move forward in the long term, it's really important that we take these hazards into consideration for a comprehensive river corridor management. So what that Senate bill, the 15245, enabled us to do was to reassess our flood risk in floodplains, but it also gave us the opportunity to start to analyze flood hazards that we had never taken into consideration before and we had no baseline of and no regulatory framework for. And this is important for the state because floodplains are a matter of statewide importance, and the CWCB works to provide the technical standards and the regulatory framework for protecting against flood hazards. And that's why when this bill came into play, the CWCB was the one to take on this program. We were allocated $700,000 to do this work, and we opened up the program to all communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program to apply. So they demonstrated that they were experiencing erosion hazards. They had commitment and local buy-in saying that they were interested in regulating these hazards in the case that maps were created. In addition, we ranked applications by where these communities were located. So their geography, their hydrology, their watershed size, the elevation, the slope of their streams, that was all taken into consideration. The red boxes on this map show where our pilot program is taking place, and it's in 8 locations. I am happy to say we did have 15 applicants, and we were able to map 8 of them. And the goals of the program are to develop a scientifically defensible set of standards for Colorado. We think by mapping the diverse locations throughout the state gives us a perspective on the variability so that we're able to move this forward in a scientifically defensible manner. We're implementing the program throughout Colorado, and ultimately our goal is to reduce flood damages from future flood events by increasing awareness of these risks, and also providing the tools such as the maps and the regulatory framework so that they can prevent against damages through better land use decisions. In Colorado, we do have diverse topography, diverse landscapes, diverse river systems. So what's unique about this program is that there are other states and other communities that have taken on similar mapping throughout the United States. However, Colorado is leveraging what these communities have already done and making it our own. This is also a voluntary program, unlike other states, where we're giving communities the option of buying in and to regulating. It's not a mandatory program. And we're also doing something different that no other state has done. We're taking the historic flood information and data and impacts of past flood events and incorporating that into the zones that we're creating. So to date, this program, we saw the need for it before we were able to solidify the funding for it. So as Chris mentioned, some of the master planning efforts that were underway after the flood event started to take into consideration these fluvial hazard zones. And also before the funding was solidified in 2014, we were able to create a regulatory analysis and a technical analysis. And that technical analysis is actually the baseline of the protocol that we're moving forward with. In 2016, we were able to get this pilot program started through the Senate bill, and it's set to complete in June of 2019. To date, we have 3 of the draft maps completed for the communities. We have a draft completed for the protocol, and this protocol is what sets the standards and what will be able to be taken forward by communities to start doing this mapping in their communities moving forward. So after the pilot, we don't have funding to continue it, but we're providing the tools for communities to go out and be able to do it. We're also happy to say that we're leveraging the technical expertise of other states. So we have a technical advisory committee comprised, and that has national experts that are QA and QCing our maps, which has been invaluable. In addition to our local partners that have applied to be a part of the program and our national experts, we've also been working with a number of other state partners and federal partners. And how we envision these maps to be used is we want communities to take them forward and implement what they see as either an overlay zone and incorporate these types of regulations into their local ordinance. So we're putting together, and it will be part of our final products, is a regulatory document with model land use codes that can be used as a baseline. We're hoping that communities use this information to protect their critical facilities, plan inundation routes so that they can get in and out and get their emergency services in and out in the time of flood, in addition to other uses. And as we strive to do, this program has multi-purpose benefits. Not only are we hoping to prevent against flood damages, we're also hoping that by minimizing the development in these critical areas that we're able to replenish our wetlands and enhance our ecosystem services. And I will invite my two other co-presenters to come back to the podium for questions.
All right. Thanks.
So thank you, Chris Sturm, again, for the record. We all had to cobble together to give Kevin's presentation. I think everybody did a great job. Thank you, guys, and we appreciate your attention to this. It seemed apropos given we're at the 5-year anniversary. And now we'll just entertain any questions that the board has.
We have any questions for Chris or Twee or Steph? Director Dutton?
I really want to thank you guys because in addition to representing the CWCB well, you have represented Colorado well, and you guys are all the experts in your fields and have a lot of respect from throughout the state. And Chris, especially, you know, the whole watershed restoration community looks to you as you've kind of become the godfather. When you and I met over 10 years ago, I had a lot of respect for you then, but just everything you've learned now and the influence that you have is pretty incredible. So thank you all for your efforts on this.
Director Hawkins.
And I would echo that, Chris, as a project director, I know how hard it is to get out on site. So the fact that you were actually on site for that many projects is really impressive. So thank you all for your work.
Director Wells.
Hi, I just wanted to say I have just bookmarked coloradoewp.com. It is a great website. Lots of photographs before and after, all that sort of thing, which really is more persuasive than just talking about it. So very nice job on that as well. And all three of you have done great work and made really good presentations. Thank you.
All right, I just wanted to say to keep in mind that this was thrown on them 5 years ago at a September board meeting in Telluride. So it just shows the flexibility of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, but then even more so, it's easy for the board members to say, yeah, let's use this money for this, but the dedication of the staff to carry these out and during a time when we were already busy. So just keep that in mind. You know, some of the numbers, $270 million and those kind of things are just astronomical when you think of what a short time frame that you guys did this in. And so I'm so grateful for, you know, you guys carrying this out and carrying it out so professionally. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Director Gallagher.
I also want to compliment you on this. You really responded to the situation and you actually grew line of services and to the state of Colorado, and we're better prepared because of your efforts. I also want to point out that our financial section also responded in an equal way coming in behind you, and also did a tremendous job in responding to the needs of the people affected.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know. I'd just like to give you an ovation, though. I just really wanted to clap. Sorry. So continue on with agenda item 12. We have Ben Wade with our water supply reserve funding.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Mr.
Ben.
Chair. For the record, Ben Wade, CWCB staff, and I'll be presenting agenda item 12A through 12F, and then I'll be handing it off to Megan for her portion of it. Agenda item 12A is by the way, all these are action items. The first two, 12A and B, have both been approved by the Gunnison Basin Roundtable. The first applicant for 12A is the Surface Creek Ditch and Reservoir Company. Their project is titled Deepwater Dam Repair Project. And so just to give you a brief summary of this project. So the purpose of this grant would assist the Surface Creek Ditch and Reservoir Company to rehab the Deepwater Dam, which is located on the Grand Mesa, in order to lift a fill restriction imposed by the state engineer and preserve 1,710 acre feet of storage for ag irrigation, some recreational uses, and potentially some M&I usage. The applicant's going to fund the preliminary engineering, testing, surveying, geotechnical reporting, final engineering design, and a portion of the construction costs and oversight, some of the post documentation and contingencies, and then water supply reserve funding will be spent on the remaining construction costs, construction surveying, and the pay and performance bond. Some of these construction activities include breaching the dam above the outlet pipe, recycling dam material for future placement, and the replacement of the outlet pipe. And as you can see on their screen, they're asking $50,000 from the Gunnison Basin account, $190,000 from the statewide account, for a total of $240,000 total ask. They have met all their matching requirements, and their match requirements is cash match coming from the applicant. Staff recommends approval. The project manager, if approved, would be Rachel Pittinger. And with us today, is Bob Morris, who is a Surface Creek Ditch and Reservoir Company board member. He is in attendance and he's available to answer any questions or concerns the board may have. Bob?
Thank you, Ben. Are there any questions for Ben? So, Bob, if you want to state your name and who you're with.
Bob Morris, I'm director on the Surface Creek Company, and would like to thank this board for considering this, but also for your past participations on Grand Mesa. We're doing some good up there, but I can assure you we will be back to see you some more. So if you have any questions about this project, I'll be glad to try and answer them.
Any questions for Bob? All right. Thank you for making the trek. We appreciate your appearance here. So
thank you.
So we have a staff recommendation.
I
Director
move
Anderson.
that we accept staff's recommendation on item 12A.
It's been moved by Director Anderson, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12A. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right,
you,
thank
Ben.
you. Agenda item 12B is the second of two from the Gunnison Basin, again, approved by the roundtable. There are two co-applicants here, Tri-County Water Conservancy District, as well as Dallas Creek Water Company, although Tri-County would be the fiscal agent here. Their project title is Emergency Domestic Water Supply.
And again, a brief summary of the project. So grant funds, if approved, would assist both of these entities, Tri-County Water Conservancy District and Dallas Creek Water Company, to establish an interconnect between their respective domestic water systems. And the purpose of this is to create the capacity to supply one another in an emergency, such as drought, hazardous material spill, or wildfire suppression. So the grant funds would be used to for 5,500 lineal feet of PVC pipe installed near County Road 1A, this location. And then the applicants would be installing 2 mobile trailer mounted pumps and upgrading 5 other existing pumps for this project. And I was speaking with Mike Berry, who is the general manager for Tri-County Water Conservancy District. And so he wanted to, and he can speak more eloquently on this, but basically they're pumping up water. In this scenario, they'd pump up water to Dallas Creek. Dallas Creek would send it down. And in case of a wildfire, mitigation, as that water comes down, it really would help out the volume and pressure to help suppress any future wildfires. Hopefully they never have one, but you never know. They have, there is a small typo on the summary sheet that's in the board packet. They are asking $25,000 from the Gunnison Basin Roundtable account, or the Basin account, $50,000 from statewide account equaling $75,000. So I think some of the numbers from the last grant made it on this one. They have met all the match requirements. Again, Rachel will be the project manager if approved, and the staff recommendation is to approve this grant. Again, I'll welcome Mike Berry, who's in attendance. He is the general manager for Tri-County Water Conservancy District, if the board has any questions or concerns for him. Mike?
Welcome, Mike. Thanks for being
Mike
here.
Berry, Tri-County Water Conservancy District. I'm their general manager, and glad to answer any questions that anyone might have about the project. This is a project that's been contemplated for several years, and it's an opportunity to provide emergency supply to both Tri-County customers on Log Hill Mesa and Dallas Creek Water Company in total. So we're trying to get the funds to get her done.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Any questions for Mike or Ben? All right. Director Anderson.
I move we accept staff's recommendation on item 12B.
It's been moved by Director Anderson, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12B. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I'd like to thank the board for funding this project, and we'll let you know how it goes.
Thanks for being in attendance. All right, agenda item 12C.
All right. So 12C, the applicant here is Beaver Park Water Incorporated. This application was approved by the Arkansas Roundtable, and this is phase 2 of this project titled Upper Canal Lining Removal and Replacement. Phase 1 was approved in September of last year, and they are just kind of in the final stages of finishing phase 1. But phase 2 is just a continuation of removing failed concrete sections of their upper canal, Beaver Park Water's upper canal, and replacing it with new form concrete. The project as a whole, a total of 4,526 linear feet of canal site has been currently identified to be removed and replaced. Phase 1 was replacing 1,200 linear feet. This phase 2, approximately 1,150 linear feet will be proposed for replacement in phase 2. They are requesting $8,000 from the Arkansas Basin account, $80,000 from the statewide account. They have met all the match requirement. So they have match requirements coming from Beaver Park as well as Penrose Water District. Penrose is also receives water from the Upper Canal. They, let's see. So staff recommendation is to approve phase 2 of this project. If approved, I would be the project manager. And with us today in attendance is Butch Miller, who is the secretary and treasurer of Beaver Park Water, as well as Steve Kastner, who works as their engineer. So I'd like to invite them up. Do you have any questions or comments for them?
Right. Come on up, Steve, Butch. If you want to state your name and who you're with.
Steve Kastner, engineer for Beaver Park Water today. Ben did a great job in describing our project. It is a 4-year plan where this will be year 2. Beaver Park's really trying to stay as a good active irrigation company and maintain the environment of irrigated agriculture in Fremont County. So I don't really have much more to say other than to thank the board, especially Jack on the board here. Thank Ben, his staff work, and also behind me is Chelsea Nutter of the Arkansas Roundtable. I don't remember Chelsea's exact title, but I know she's the one I call when I have questions.
Question answerer. Welcome, Butch.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for everything.
If you would just state your name.
Oh, my name is Butch Miller, and I'm on the board of Beaver Park. And I thank you guys for going along with us and supporting us on some of the work that we have done already. And with your help and everything, we've accomplished a lot, and we plan to accomplish more. I thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Butch. All right. Anybody have any questions for Ben or Steve or Butch? Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Steve and Butch, for making the trip over here. If there are no further questions, I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12C.
It's been moved by Director Goebel, seconded by Director Gallagher, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12C. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for being present. Continue on, Ben.
All right. Butch and I were talking, hopefully funding of phase 2 of that project will help with the sting of last night's Rockies loss, but probably not. 12D, as we keep on moving along, this is a application from Lake County Board of Commissioners. The project title is Lake County Dairy Flume and Hayden Reservoir Project. And if funded, the applicant will use WSRF grant funds to purchase and install a flume and diversion structure on Corskett Creek, which is high on Mount Elbert. Telemetry station will also be installed for proper management of their water right up there. They have already partnered with the United States Forest Service because this diversion structure will be on U.S. Forest Service owned land. This flume and diversion will allow the county to utilize the direct flow into the in their augmentation plan and their integrated system, which is outlined in their water decrees. Grant funds will also be used to complete a bathymetric survey of Hayden Reservoir to be used for storage of future augmentation replace credits. They hope that Hayden Reservoir will remain a recreational asset in that county, and they have been requesting $2,400 from the Arkansas Basin account, $23,905 from statewide, for a total of $26,305. They have more in kind than cash, in kind from the Board of Commissioners, $3,150 in cash. Staff recommendation is to approve this project, and the project manager would be Rachel. We're giving her a lot of work this board meeting, just piling more on her plate. With us today is Sarah Mudge, who is one of the Lake County Commissioners, and so she'd be available for any questions or concerns the board may have.
All right, welcome, Sarah. If you'd state your name.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah Mudge. I'm a Lake County Commissioner. And on behalf of Lake County, I'm happy to be here and to express my great gratitude for CWCB's consideration of this. Being able to implement these infrastructure pieces is going to be a great catalyst for us to continue to implement our augmentation plan. And we look forward to the partnership in the future.
All right, thank you. Is there any question for Sarah or Ben? Director Goebel.
Sarah, thanks for making the trip over. Appreciate that. I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12D.
It's been moved by Director Goebel, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12D. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, moving along to 12E. This is the application here is from the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative. The project title is Monarch Pass Forest and Watershed Health Project. They are requesting $37,000 from the Arkansas Basin account, $366,739 from statewide, for a total $403,739. And I'll get to their match in just a little bit, but first the summary of the project. If funded, some of the objectives for this project is to contract and mobilize equipment with a private party, complete ground vegetation and fuel removal, complete gravel pit reclamation and channel stabilization, complete stream bank stabilization. So the project is aiming to reduce the extent of the insect infestation, improve forest and watershed health, reduce fuel loading, protect infrastructure by the removal of trees in a 600-acre steep slope area on Monarch Pass, which is near the headwaters of the Arkansas River. So historically, projects like this have been very expensive and unsafe to treat those steep slopes. And so this is more of a demo project, and they're looking to solve these issues by introducing a new cut-to-length technology and equipment. This project was actually presented at the May board meeting tour, pre-board meeting tour, I guess. So this probably sounds very familiar. But the applicant states that many important reservoirs and water infrastructure are located in areas that are adjacent to extremely steep slopes. They identified two in their application: Clear Creek Reservoir and Twin Lakes, a couple thousand acres in each location, which would be valuable. This type of technology would be valuable to treat those slopes. Just the cost of doing this treatment has prevented mitigation from wildfires in the past, and the applicant states in their application that this technology will be would significantly reduce the cost. They estimate approximately 60% cost savings. Along with the tree removal, this project also includes watershed restoration activities such as stream bank protection, soil amendment, seeding, and willow planting. In Task 3, they have a gravel pit reclamation, which will work to reduce the sediment load to the headwaters of the Arkansas River. And if approved, the applicant has estimated that grant funds will be utilized to protect 1,000 linear feet of the South Arkansas River and up to 600 acres of preserved habitat. And so quickly just wanted to go through the funding match. Unfortunately, I did leave off a couple here. They had more match than what I had in the summary sheet, but I listed many of the partners that are contributing to this project. We have the Upper Ark Water Conservancy District, some cash contributions from the applicant, Chaffee County, Trout Unlimited, City of Salida, Town of Poncha Springs, Colorado Springs Utilities, United States Forest Service have all contributed cash. U.S. Forest Service is also contributing some in-kind match as well. There was one issue that staff just wanted to bring to the board's attention. So if funded, this would be first of its kind within the water supply reserve. grant fund program. This particular forest health project would not qualify for the watershed restoration program funding as per the board approved program guidance. I believe is 2016, but funding for forest health projects would not include forest fuel reduction treatment. So that's why we're seeing it as a water supply reserve application. To answer any questions or pose any of the board's concerns, with us today is Chelsea Nutter. She is the projects manager with the Upper Arkansas Water Conservancy District, again, who has contributed cash to this project. So we'll bring her up to the lectern.
Welcome, Chelsea, if you want to say your name and who you're with.
Thank you, Chelsea Nutter, Projects Manager, Upper Arkansas Water Conservancy District. I want to start off by first thanking you for your consideration of this project. As we continue to build this, we're starting to see that basically a watershed group is emerging out of this process. It's been pretty incredible. We've also received matching funds from Pueblo Board of Waterworks, as well as a few from some local citizens as well. So we've been educating about this project, and people have just been sending in, their own donations. So that's pretty cool as well. But yeah, our hope is that, we'll continue to work together, and after this project, maybe be able to move to other areas and keep this group together to try to work on these forest health issues. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? Director Wells.
I'd like to hear a little more about the equipment. I was looking for photographs and didn't find any. But so what does it do that we haven't been able to do before? What does
So
it look like?
I will do my best to try to explain it. Usually Alex, my partner from the Forest Service, covers this one, but it's called cut to length. And so basically it is, it's a machine that looks kind of like a snowcat, and you can tether it to like a stump or to another piece of equipment. And then that allows it to move down the slopes. And then it has two arms that come out, and I think it goes 30 feet on both sides. And they actually, cut the trees, clear them, and then they set all the slash in front of it. And then they stack the trees on the side, and then the equipment actually goes over the slash as it's moving down, and it could go up to 70%. I mean, we've seen some videos with it, and then as it gets down far enough, it just it pulls it back up, but it's working with the machine as well. And so what we've been hearing about this equipment is that it has less environmental impact, as well as the issue is the machinery is not here yet. But, once we're hoping that somebody will, see an opportunity in this demonstration project. And if we could have that machinery out here, it significantly reduces the cost compared to other steep slope methods, such as by helicopter, or I forgot what the other type is called. Can you help me?
Cable system.
Yeah, thank you. Where you actually have to put in all the roads and, put a big tower up. So I hope that helps. I do have some videos if you would like me to send you a link.
Director Hawkins.
I have a question for Ben, if that's okay.
Andrew.
I'll get the mic closer. I want to start by saying that I think this is a really excellent project. My questions really have to do with the fact that my basin has suffered some post-fire issues this year, and I think I might get some questions about the use of the statewide WSRF fund as an appropriate place for forest treatment. And so Chris Sturm has gotten calls from me already asking about why this type of work is not eligible for the watershed funding, and that's coming out of constituents from my basin. So could you just walk us through a little bit about how the staff did the review and whether statewide WSRF is being seen as potentially eligible for other similar projects? And again, I think this particular project is amazing. I don't have any issues with it. I just want to make sure I can answer questions from constituents from my basin.
Sure. Yeah, there was conversations that we had with Kevin and Greg and Craig involving this particular project, and so we had many conversations about it in terms of a statewide issue. You know, this demo project. You know, if other, I think if I remember right, Carol Eucarius from Arwick. The applicant has been in conversations with other entities in the South Platte, like Denver Water and Aurora Water, and so the conversation with them is if they can make this a successful project, you know, near headwaters or other critical infrastructure, it could be used in other basins as well, just to help with you know, the wildfire mitigation. So yeah, we had many conversations with that and spoke with Jack prior to, and just conversations with Chelsea and Carol to make sure that it's you know, meeting that criteria of being a you know, that demo project that can be replicated in other parts of the state. Does that help answer your question?
Maybe I can ask a more specific question to make sure I really understand this. When we're looking at eligibility for statewide WSRF funds, is it really looking at the water plan that is making the difference, or is it that this is a sort of demo or pilot project?
Yeah, I think it helps with some of the goals of the water plan in terms of watershed health projects for sure, and forest health, and how that, you know, that like Amy was talking about earlier today in her EDO director's report, as far as the nexus between forest health and watershed health and water supply. Want to add anything?
Sure. Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. Don't have much to add. I think Ben and Chelsea have done a great job with this, but I think that's a valid question for sure. And as Ben has indicated, we had a lot of conversations around this. We did want to flag it for the board, as Ben has already done, that this is in some ways setting a new precedent. So I think, you know, we want to make crystal clear that the board is aware of that. You know, that being said, you know, it does meet some of the watershed health goals of the water plan. As a pilot project, I think there is certainly value in demonstrating, you know, the new equipment and kind of what things can be done in the state. I think the concerns about precedent from Kevin and Chris Sturm especially speak more to, you know, the fact that we have not traditionally funded things like this, and there is certainly a huge need out there. And this could, you know, in some ways potentially use up a lot of the funding that's available, and we want to make sure that, you know, that doesn't necessarily happen. But as a program, the WSRF is fairly broad as it's written in the criterion guidelines, and we went back and, you know, just, you know, made sure that there were no prohibitions on this. So, but I'm glad, you know, you're asking the question. We did want to make sure that the board is aware of, you know, the fact that this is going in a new direction for us with the program.
Thank you.
Director Gallagher.
Thanks. I also had some questions about this myself, but I connected it through the watershed piece of it, which was managing the watershed and improving water quality. And water quality has a lot to do with water supply. And that brought me along to that place. Also, the concept of it's being replicated elsewhere. In terms of its asking from the statewide account. So I fully support this project.
Any other? Director Wells.
Just one comment. I was impressed by, well, first of all, the number of people who have contributed, but the Forest Service is contributing over $800,000 in cash and in kind. So I think when we can leverage to that degree, you know, which is twice as much as a WSRF grant, that it's a good opportunity to get way more bang for our buck than we often are able to. On the other hand, I do think we need to figure out how to address forest health. Denver Water put in $16 million over the prior 5 years and has another $16 million in the next 5 years. And so I think being able to see in a pilot program whether we can use our money more wisely, I think is very important.
Thank you. Any other questions? Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate all the comments and questions on this project. I agree it's a very interesting project, and whenever it first came to our needs assessment committee, I was curious, why we were looking at such steep slopes to work on, but they got me some numbers, and I don't remember the exact acreage across the state at these steep slopes and how much opportunity there is to expand it to other parts of the state, and it made me even more interested in it. So Chelsea, thanks for making the trip up here. And if there's no further questions, I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12E.
It's been moved by Director Goebel, seconded by Director Hawkins, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12E. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chelsea. Thanks, Ben.
All right. The final grant for me today is going to be agenda item 12F. Applicant is the Arkansas River Basin Water Forum. The project title is the Arkansas Basin Roundtable website, and they're requesting $5,240 from the Arkansas River Basin account, $7,860 from statewide. Total request is $13,100. They met their matching requirements. It's all in-kind contribution. And so the objectives of this project was just create a central website for the Arkansas Basin Roundtable. They have 3 now. They're looking to just go to 1. They want to utilize a story map to display the work of the Basin Roundtable that illustrates all the projects that are going on, the programs, as well as their success stories. Publish roundtable meeting documents through this new website, all the educational efforts through PEPO, and other educational efforts, funding resources, general information, all in one-stop shop, and make it user-friendly website that can be managed and updated by their PEPO coordinator, who's going to be responsible for just all managing the content to the website to make sure it's relevant, reliable, and timely for all the information that needs to be posted on that new website. Staff recommends approval. I would be the project manager. Again, we have Chelsea Nutter, project manager for Upper Ark Water Conservancy District, to answer any questions on this particular project, if there are any. So I'd like to invite her back up.
Welcome again, Chelsea. You do know everything, just like Mike said earlier. Are there any questions? Or Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again, Chelsea. If there are no further questions, I move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12F.
It's been moved by Director Goebel, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12F. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Ben, for your agenda items here. And now we have Megan.
Hi there. For the record, I'm Megan Holcomb, CWCB staff. I'll be presenting agenda items 12G through M today. Let me move this. I'm going to provide just a short summary, as you all have the water activity summary sheets in front of you. Agenda item 12G to start is a request for $89,000 from the Yampa Basin account to assist the Friends of Yampa in developing information necessary for effective and sustainable riparian management programs in the Yampa River Basin.
The Yampa River Leafy Spurge project will support scientific work, engage local youth, and build on local knowledge in relationships to protect both agricultural and environmental water uses for the future. There are 9 contributing entities, totaling $76,000, $572 in cash and in-kind matching for a total project cost of over $165,000. Craig Gabu will be the project manager if approved. There are no additional needs have been identified, and staff does recommend approval. Tim Corrigan, the Routt County Commissioner and member of the Yampa River Leafy Spurge project, is in attendance. Mr. Corrigan, would you like to address the board?
Welcome. If you want to state your name and who you're with.
You bet. Tim Corrigan, Routt County Commissioner. Thank you for entertaining this application. Welcome to Steamboat Springs in Routt County, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any questions for Tim or Megan? I just wanted to point out, as Director Wells often does, there's a lot of collaboration in this project, and it's nice to see. So it's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Director Dutton.
I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate you bringing this project to us, because weed management projects are not as flashy as some of the things that people do, but they're critically important to protecting our riparian ecosystems. So thank you guys for putting this together and for bringing it to us.
Any other questions? Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Tim, for coming forward. And I also want to recognize Ben Bell, who has been leading this effort from an ad hoc group effort, grassroots, people who want to improve the river and the agricultural activities and the wildlife habitat. Ben, do you want to come up there just to introduce yourself?
By the way, Ben's a recovering county commissioner.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Anyway, leafy spurge is an aggressive non-native in our river system here. It is very aggressive. It has infested the river corridor from Hayden all the way down into the Dinosaur National Monument. It has affected the upland grazing areas, but the river is really the vector, is really the seeding mechanism for it getting into head gates and going up into either into the agricultural lands, and it also has crowded out all the native forage for wildlife species. It itself is not a forage for either cattle or for any ungulates that might use the river corridor. So this is not to provide operating and maintenance kind of funding. This is to provide the research essential to developing best management techniques to use along the river corridor. We can't use chemicals. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve staff recommendation on item 12G.
It's been moved by Director Gallagher, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12G. Is there any further discussion? I was just wanting to know if Jen, if there were any bugs that ate leafy spurge, like the goat heads. Oh, were you? Oh, good. That'd be nice to know. All right. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Agenda item
That
12H.
is not the right button. Great. Agenda item 12H is a request for $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account and $239,400 from the statewide account to help the Weber Ditch Company replace an existing diversion and headgate system. This project will work to improve a structure for diverting, managing, and measuring water, and also replace 2,100 feet of corroded corrugated pipe with PVC pipe. The Weber Ditch is one of 2 major historic ditches in the Mancos Valley being modernized for efficiency. 3 contributing entities are matching the request with $177,200 cash and in-kind funds for a total project cost of over $440,000. If approved, I will be the project manager. The applicant was unfortunately not able to make it today, but I'm happy to take questions as needed. No additional needs have been identified and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director Hawkins.
I just wanted to note, and this is in your materials, that if you look at the Basin Roundtable approval letter, you will see that there was a little bit of a shift, and that has to do with the Southwest Basin Roundtable being firm on our diet while the severance tax funds are thin for us. If there are no questions about that, I would move approval on agenda item. I lost the number.
Oh, 12H.
12H.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins, second by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12H. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Megan.
Great. Next, we have agenda item 12I, which is a request for $25,000 from the Southwest Basin account to assist Rivers Edge West in the Dolores River Restoration Partnership. This project is an active revegetation volunteer project with the Wildlands Restoration Volunteers, as well as 300 acres of restoration site monitoring with the Tres Rios BLM field office. WSRF funding will be used to pay for the Wildlands Restoration Volunteers volunteer group, project supplies, 4 weeks of a Conservation Corps 2-person monitoring strike team, and project coordination associated with the 2 activities. There are 3 contributing entities that are matching the request with $26,700 in cash and in-kind funds for a total project cost of $51,700. If approved, I will be the project manager. The applicant was not able to make it today, so I'm happy to take questions if needed. No additional needs have been identified and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director Hawkins.
I would move staff approval for agenda item 12I.
Been moved by Director Hawkins, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12I. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have agenda item 12J, which is a request for $60,000 from the Colorado Basin account to assist the Grand Valley Water Users Association with Task 1 of the Roller Dam Electrical Upgrade Project. This project aims to improve the roller dam and associated government Highline Canal by improving the electrical and control systems that operate the diversion structure headgates. The objectives of this project and of the master plan project are to improve water delivery system operations, capacity and reliability of the roller dam and associated headgates, and to sustain the ecological health of the river while preserving the agricultural economy of the Grand Valley. Grand Valley Water Users Association has received 4 WSRF grants totaling $437,700 for previous phases of this large-scale effort. For the electrical upgrade project before you, there are 3 contributing entities matching $164,098 in cash and in-kind funds for a total project cost of just over $224,000. If approved, Anna Moss will be the project manager. The applicant was not able to make it today, but he does send his appreciation of your past support of the roller dam in consideration of this request. No additional needs have been identified and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director George.
I see no questions. I would move staff recommendation and that we fund agenda item 12J.
It's been moved by Director George, seconded by Director Gallagher, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12J. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 12K.
All right, agenda item 12K is a request for $18,900 from the Colorado Basin account to assist Kendall Reservoir Company in rehabilitating the Kendall Reservoir, also known as Kenny Creek Reservoir. This reservoir is located on Grand Mesa, and in 2016, the State Engineer's Office conducted an inspection of Kendall Dam and identified recommendations for improving the condition and safety of the structure. Due to a change in the dam's classification from a jurisdictional dam to non-jurisdictional dam, the zero storage restriction has since been removed. However, rehabilitation of the reservoir still needs to occur to support agricultural and recreational uses. The U.S. Forest Service and Kendall Reservoir Company are collectively contributing $10,500 in-kind match for a total project cost of $29,400. This is a correction to your water summary sheet, which said it was both cash and in-kind. Those funds are all in kind. If approved, I will be the CWCB project manager. The applicant was not able to make it today, but sends his appreciation of the board's consideration. No additional needs have been identified, and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director George?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing no questions, I would move adoption of staff recommendation and funding of agenda item 12K.
Been moved by Director George, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12K. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, next we have agenda item 12L, which is a request for $6,600 from the South Platte Basin account to assist in the Big Thompson Conservation District for the project titled Irrigation Water Return Flow Filter Strip. The purpose of this application is to assist the Conservation District along with Colorado State University and the NRCS in demonstrating the effectiveness of using filter strips. This is done by measuring water quality and quantity entering the field where a filter strip has been planted to identify the amount of nutrients, sediment, and water that comes from the shed above. Specifically, WSRF funds will be expended to assist in the purchase of advertising, signage, an information kiosk, pamphlets, brochures, a video report, and workshops that bring attention to their efforts and the resulting benefits. 3 entities are contributing a cash and in-kind match of $55,735 for a total project cost of $62,335. If approved, Craig Gabu will be the CWCB project manager. Unfortunately, the applicant was not able to make it today, but no additional needs have been identified and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director Wells?
Well, I would kind of like to know what a filter strip looks like. But if you can't tell me, I'll just go ahead and move staff recommendation.
That I would love to know too. I am actually presenting this project on behalf of Craig, who's not able to make it here, so I am not as familiar with the project, did not hear it. But I was looking for some photos in the application, and I did not see anything beyond kind of the area.
We had a picture of this in our roundtable meeting. So it's just planting a buffer crop before the river so that when the water flows through, it filters out the water before it hits the ditch or the river. Planted and filtered. Yeah.
Well, great.
Director.
Controls the sheet flow.
Yeah, and it cleans it up as it goes through that. Yep.
Well, with that knowledge, I would like to move the staff recommendation on agenda item 12.
L.
Sorry, I'm looking at you.
It's been moved by Director Wells, second by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12L. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
My last item today for you is agenda item 12M, which is a request for $25,000 from the South Platte Basin account and $25,000 from the statewide account to assist Left Hand Watershed Oversight Group for the project titled Fish Passage and Education on Left Hand Creek. The purpose of this multi-objective project is to implement a fish passage feasibility study and to support Left Hand Group staff in the stakeholder outreach and engagement portion of the study. For their outreach, they will promote education about stream connectivity, but 5 entities are contributing a cash-only match of $49,165 for a total project cost of $99,165. If approved, Craig Gabu will be the project manager. Unfortunately, the applicant was not able to make it today, but no additional needs have been identified and staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions for Megan? Director Wells.
Noting the contribution by a number of watershed and river health entities, I would like to move staff recommendation for agenda item 12M.
It's been moved by Director Wells, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12M. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Great.
Thank you, Megan.
We have one more WSRF agenda item, which Russ will present.
Welcome, Russ.
Thanks. No, I'm standing between us and lunch, so I'll be brief. Agenda item N is the Russ Sand CWCB staff, for the record. Agenda item N is the South Platte Regional Water Development Concept Feasibility Study, perhaps the longest title in today's presentations. The request is for a total of $350,000 in grant request. That's made up by $77,500 from the South Platte Basin account and $77,500 from the Metro account, with a total of $195,000 coming from the statewide account. There's also 7 entities that are providing an in-kind match that will make the total of the project $470,000. Again, with a $350,000 grant request. This project envisions, it actually builds on work starting back in 2015, envisions multiple storage facilities, an added conveyance along the South Platte to enhance capacity throughout the South Platte Basin to store unappropriated water, support reusable supplies, ATM water, and augmentation plan water. I will add as an aside that I just, as we were sitting here, got a text from my daughter who's 6 and is working on the South Platte with the Greenways Foundation to do a cleanup. And instead of a cleanup, she was apparently digging a hole, which I can only surmise is her explaining to the rest of her first grade class what this project is about. But this project will look at organizational structure, drill into the demand estimates a little bit further, identify water quality challenges, and evaluate total cost of this project moving forward. It will also support municipal, environmental, and agricultural needs, making it multi-beneficial. Again, there are 7 entities involved. If approved, I would be the project manager. Staff is recommending approval, and Joe Frank, who's general manager for the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District, is here today. I'll let him speak.
Right. Welcome, Joe. And thank you for your sacrifice. I know you're missing noon basketball today at NJC.
That is true.
Because I usually play with him there. So anyway.
Yeah. For the record, my name is Joe Frank. I'm the general manager of the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District. I just wanted to point out a few more collaborative pieces to this project. I wanted to recognize and thank Doug Grabotham, who's here in the audience. He was a huge catalyst to putting this together, both at the initial planting the seed, I guess, in the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan, but also bringing those 7 entities together, known as the South Platte Regional Opportunities Working Group, or otherwise SPROG. And as Russ mentioned, those 7 entities are putting $120,000 both in cash and in-kind. But I also wanted to point out that prior to April of this year, they put out over $200,000 in cash, as well as countless hours of in-kind time to advance this concept. So I wanted to point that out. Also, we're back to the roundtable level, with the roundtables being very supportive and collaboration and helping out. We've formed a task force that's now over 40 people, not including consultants, which may bid on the RFP for this. So if this is successful in RFP, we'll actually go out on Friday and we'll hit the ground running. And so finally, I just wanted to thank the staff and all of you for your continued support of this effort. And I think you'll see some good things come from this, both from the basin and statewide benefits if this is approved. And I thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And Russ, any questions? Director Wells.
I don't have a question because Director Yan gave an excellent presentation at the Water Congress about this project, which involves, this is really studying how will it work, how could it be governed, and that sort of thing. But I think up to 3 storage reservoirs on the Platte River so that we can actually help municipalities and keep land in agriculture and talk about a watershed approach. It's the length of the South Platte approach, which is pretty impressive. And so I really think this is a really big deal. And I'm very happy to see it being brought forward. It hits every button there is in the state water plan. So it's really quite impressive.
Thank you.
If no one has questions, I would move staff recommendation for item 12N.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Goebel. Sorry, he beat you. Director Hawkins. That we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 12N. And I just wanted to note that we are one of the funding matchers, Pruitt and North Sterling reservoirs. We won't necessarily receive any direct benefit to this. We're just interested in doing the best that we can for our basin. So I just wanted to point that out. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Russ. All right. Thank you, board members. We got through it. So we'll try to reconvene. We're just about 10 minutes behind, so we'll start at 1:20. That's the scheduled time. So we have lunch. It's probably outside, I imagine. And so it's for board members and staff. So we'll take a recess until